Hi guys! Tonight we slip quietly into a world where winter does not politely nip at your cheeks, but clamps down with a seriousness that makes you wonder how anyone kept their fingers. You step outside a thatched cottage just as dusk settles across a medieval village, and the cold is so sharp it feels like it wants to carve a little signature into your bones. You draw in one breath, and it stings your nose. You exhale, and watch a pale cloud drift away like a tiny lost spirit. You probably will not survive this, and yet peasants did with habits so ordinary to them, and so astonishing to you that they become their own kind of bedtime magic. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, tell me your location and what time it is as you listen. Now dim the lights. You push open the creaking wooden door and slip back inside, feeling the shift from biting outdoor wind to the heavy, smoky stillness of the single room you call home. The night presses on the shutters, and you sense that it is going to be a cold one, the sort that makes even seasoned villagers mutter under their breath. The air carries the scent of damp wool, old smoke, and the faint sourness of boots drying near the hearth. It is not unpleasant. It is simply life reduced to its most elemental shapes. You step forward and nudge the door latch into place. Every peasant knows that a loose door is an invitation for drafts to slither in and steal what little warmth you've collected. This is not superstition. It is practical survival born from centuries of lived winter. One mainstream fact quietly sits here in the room with you. Medieval peasants relied far more on insulation by habit than on actual architectural skill. They stuffed gaps with moss bits of cloth or wads of straw, anything that prevented the wind from picking up speed inside the home. It does not stop the cold entirely, but it buys you comfort in tiny, precious increments. Your ears adjust to the hush inside. The thin walls carry the soft moan of wind weaving through distant trees. You shake off the last flakes of snow clinging to your cloak. The first moment inside is always the same. Your skin prickles as it tries to warm itself. And as you stand there rubbing your hands together, you catch a tiny fringe detail that people no longer mention in polite conversation. Some peasants kept small slivers of tallow tucked near the door, not just for light, but as a fast way to soothe cracked lips or finger splits. It is a little trick someone taught someone who taught someone else, a memory passed like a folded scrap of paper from one generation to the next. You hunch down and place your hands near the faint glow of the hearth. The day's fire has already dimmed to dull orange crumbs. The room feels suspended in a moment between light and dark, warm and cold, safety and restlessness. And here in this quiet you notice something scholars whisper about as they scratch their notes. Historians still argue whether peasants truly felt more resigned to the winter nights, or whether they improvised, endlessly adjusting their routines with far more creativity than we assume. Maybe this old room is proof of both. You lean closer to the embers and breathe gently, hoping they flare. They do, but only a little. Your family moves around you with the soft choreography of people who have lived too long in too tight a space. Someone coughs into a sleeve. Someone else stomps snow from their shoes. A child tries to warm stiff fingers and mumbles a sleepy complaint. It is a small world, but a full one. You take in every detail because you know once you lie down for the night these sounds will become the backdrop of your dreams. You reach up and touch the low ceiling beam. There is frost forming on the underside, thin enough to ignore but cold enough to remind you that winter is not just outside. It seeps into every joint and board. The straw stuff between the beams quivers as the wind nudges the roof, and for a moment the home feels like it sighs. You step toward the corner where your sleeping space waits. The earth floor beneath your feet is cold and slightly uneven. You know where every dip and rise sits because your feet have memorized them through countless nights. You lay out what you have for warmth tonight. A patched wool tunic, a rough sheet of linen that smells faintly of smoke, a handful of straw to fluff the bedding. Nothing is soft the way modern sleep expects softness. Everything is serviceable, textured, trustworthy. You can almost hear winter chuckling outside, amused that you think these few items are enough. Yet they are. Peasants slept through harsher nights with even less. You kneel and smooth the straw, letting the crackling sound soothe the buzz of the outside world. The prickly strands shift under your palms. You remember something you heard earlier at the communal well, a small gossip thread that makes your brows lift. Old Bran claims that if you scatter crushed juniper needles under the bedding on the first night of deep winter, the spirits of frost will overlook your home. You suspect Bran just enjoys seeing people try odd rituals, but you quietly scatter a few needles anyway. A tiny ritual never hurts, and the smell is calming, fragrant enough to cut through the mustiness. You settle deeper into the bedding and feel the cold seep around you like slow water. The first moments of lying down are always the hardest. Every inch of you is aware of winter's touch. You tuck your knees toward your chest to preserve warmth. You rub your hands together again, listening to the soft rasp of skin on skin. The fire crackles in a way that implies cooperation, but not generosity. You will get heat, but not much. You look toward the shuttered window where faint moonlight slips through a hairline crack. The wind nudges the boards again. It is not strong, just curious. You exhale and let your breath float upward. The air is heavy but not suffocating. In this dimness you start thinking odd thoughts, like whether people in warmer climates ever truly understand sleep as survival. You wonder if warmth feels sweeter when threatened. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the soundscape shift. A distant dog barks. A neighbour hurries past, boots crunching. The fire pops sharply, sending a little ember dancing upward. You crack an eye open to check if it landed anywhere dangerous. It did not. You relax. Your thoughts drift naturally toward the rhythm of the household settling in. Everything slows. Everyone slows. Even the wind outside seems to lean into a gentler whisper. You pull the wool tighter around your neck. You breathe in the lingering scent of juniper and smoke. And as your body warms by fractions, you feel the story carrying you into the heart of winter night. Soon you will sleep like they did. But first you let yourself imagine what the cold wants from you, and why you keep resisting it with such simple, stubborn rituals. You stay curled in the dim warmth for a few breaths before shifting your attention to what fills the room more than anything else. Smoke. It hangs in the air like a lazy guest who never quite leaves. You blink through the soft haze and feel the slight sting at the corners of your eyes. A medieval cottage is never truly clear of smoke, and tonight the cold outside makes it even more stubborn. The chimney is not a neat brick tunnel. It is more like a suggestion carved into the rafters. The hot breath of the hearth simply rises and hopes it finds its way out. Most of it does not. You sit up slowly and notice how your hair already carries the scent. Every peasant you pass tomorrow will smell exactly like you. That smoky fragrance is the shared perfume of winter. One mainstream historical fact sits right here in the air. Early medieval homes often lacked a true chimney, relying instead on holes in the roof or side vents that only functioned when the wind cooperated. Some nights the wind decides to argue instead of help. Tonight is one of those nights. You rub your eyes with the back of your hand and watch the faint curls of smoke drift upward. They twist around the beams as if trying to warm them. Light tries its best to escape from the hearth, scattering through the haze and giving your little home a dreamy glow. You stand and step closer to the fire, holding your hands out again. The heat is pleasant but thin, like a warm memory instead of an actual flame. Behind you someone coughs lightly, the kind of cough you hear all through winter. Not alarming, just familiar. You turn to glance at the room. The walls are timber planks, some warped, some cracked, all dusted with a fine film of soot. Everything here carries the same story. Nothing was built to impress guests. It was built to keep you alive. You trace a fingertip along a beam and feel the roughness of years of smoke settling into it. The texture tells its own history. You shift your cloak aside and make your way to the low bench near the back wall. A few bundles of straw lean there tied with cord saved for bedding, or to stuff into gaps that widen in the cold. You give one bundle a small tap. A puff of dust rises. You sniff and wrinkle your nose because the dust smells faintly of the outdoors, cold, damp, raw. For a moment you wonder if your lungs will ever feel clean again. A tiny fringed tidbit drifts into memory. Some villagers once believed that placing a sprig of rosemary near the bed purified the smoky air. Whether this works or not, the fresh scent certainly helps a little. You glance toward a small herb bunch hanging by the door. Maybe tonight you will move it closer. The fire crackles in a low, almost apologetic tone. The light flickers across the faces in the room. You see shadows blinking awake as the fire shifts. Is it your imagination, or do the shadows look tired too? You walk back to the hearth and crouch. The smoke stings your throat in a familiar way, like an old rival that keeps showing up to remind you who holds the power in winter. You take the small iron poker and stir the embers with gentle movements. A soft chorus of sparks rises bright for a moment before fading into the dark. The smoke above you thickens for a beat. You exhale, leaning back slightly. There is something strangely comforting about this dance. You depend on the fire even as it tests your patience. It feels like a stubborn friend who knows you cannot leave. You shift your weight and glance upward. The roof beams form a triangle of dark shapes above. Some smoke leaks through the tiny gaps in the thatch. Some curls downward before it changes its mind and slides sideways. You take a slow breath and relax into the motion. This is not a place designed for perfect sleep. It is a place made for survival, and your body accepts that trade. You let your hand hover over the fire again, and this time you try to imagine how many nights like this your ancestors endured. 100 winters, 1,000. The thought makes you smile softly. Peasants might not have had warm homes, but they had resilience carved into their bones. Historians still argue whether the smoky interiors of peasant cottages caused chronic respiratory problems, or whether the constant exposure actually hardened their lungs in a strange kind of biological training. You wonder which version your body might choose. You slide closer to your bedding again. The thick layer of smoke makes the air heavy near the ceiling but thinner down where you sleep. You settle onto the straw with a slow sigh. The floor is cold through the thin padding. You adjust your cloak so it drapes along your side like a barrier. The fire's glow paints the walls in hues of orange and red. You blink up at the ceiling and watch the haze drift, forming shapes that dissolve before you can name them. Smoke has a way of making the world feel smaller and quieter. The edges of the room soften. Sounds drop into a gentle murmur. You feel your shoulders loosen. Your mind starts drifting in that half-waking place, where thoughts stretch like sleepy cats. You shift again, picking a more comfortable place on the straw. It pokes a little, but you've grown nearly fond of the scratchiness. It keeps you aware of your own body grounded in the moment. You inhale. The air tastes like wood and ash. It is not fresh, but it is familiar. You let it fill your lungs. You let your exhale drift upward into the smoky veil. You notice someone else lying down near the door, wrapped in thick wool. Their breathing is slow and even the kind of rhythm that lulls you toward your own tiredness. You sense the whole house beginning to surrender tonight. A quiet shift of the wind outside sends a ripple through the thatch. A little trickle of cold air sneaks in around the rafters, pushing the smoke downward for a heartbeat. You pull the blanket closer around your shoulders. The cold is always looking for ways inside. It thinks of itself as clever. You breathe slowly and watch the fire soften into a calmer glow. The smoke hangs steady now, moving only when your breath disturbs it. You are learning to accept it as a companion. The weight of the day settles into your limbs. You let your eyes close for a moment, then open them, not quite ready to sleep, but already drifting toward that quiet edge. The smoke curls above you like a dim ceiling cloud. You feel the warmth of the fire at your toes and the cold creeping along your back. This balance is the reality of a peasant winter night. Imperfect, smoky, and strangely peaceful once you lean into it. You nestle deeper into the bedding, tug the cloak closer, and listen to the soft crackle of the hearth breathing its slow, smoky lullaby. You shift your weight on the straw, feeling the rough fibers adjust beneath you, and your mind drifts toward the next nightly ritual every medieval peasant knows by heart. Layering, always layering. Not because it is comfortable, but because cold has a talent for slipping through every weakness in fabric and bone. You reach for the pile of clothing you set aside earlier, and already you can sense the temperature deepening into the kind that makes breath feel solid. You pick up your first wool layer, the one with frayed cuffs and small repairs that map the story of your winter survival. As you wrap it around your shoulders, you register something the old village priest once mentioned during a casual fireside talk. One recorded observation from the early household accounts notes that peasants often owned far fewer garments than people imagine today, yet they understood the subtle art of doubling and tripling these pieces in clever combinations. You think about that as you tug the garment close and feel the warmth slowly collect beneath it. You reach for another layer, a patchwork mix of linen and wool. It carries the scent of the hearth mixed with the faint sharpness of cold air from earlier. As you shake it out, a few bits of straw fall to the floor. You smirk quietly. Straw finds its way into everything during winter. You slip the cloth over your head and pull it down around your torso, adjusting the collar until it rests comfortably. The weight of the fabric feels reassuring, like a shield made of small, stubborn threads. As you tuck in the loose ends, your mind flicks to a peculiar memory someone shared at the last market gathering. According to a wandering tinker who claimed to tour countless villages each year, some households used old scraps of felt or even flattened bits of rabbit fur to plug the necklines and sleeves of winter clothes. It is an odd picture, and you chuckle under your breath imagining an entire family rustling as they move stuffed with improvised insulation. You keep working through the layers with quiet determination. Each piece of clothing is not just fabric. It is time, it is habit, it is protection. You smooth the fabric along your sides and let your breath warm the inside of your collar. The room's chill still nestles close, but it no longer bites quite as sharply. The fire behind you pops, throwing a brief cascade of a light across the floor. Someone by the wall pulls a blanket tighter and sighs deeply, a sound you recognize as the universal signal of a body giving up the day. You follow their example, settling onto your bedding again. The layers make you feel slightly bulky, but in the best way. Wrapped, padded, secure. As you adjust your position, you notice how the cold sneaks between your ankles. You pull your feet closer, curling inward. Winter rewards compact shapes more than stretched limbs. You breathe out slowly and let the sound fade into the smoky room. Your fingers drift along the fabric that covers you, tracing worn seams. You can feel the hours of handiwork in those stitches. Someone sat with dim light and tired eyes, making every thread count. You shift again and let your hands rest against your chest. Your thoughts linger on what scholars sometimes note when studying rural life from this era. There is a lingering question among researchers about whether peasants layered out of simple instinct, or whether this practice formed a more structured nightly routine passed deliberately from elders to children. The evidence is thin, and so the debate lingers in dusty manuscripts. You imagine future historians arguing over the way you're dressing right now, and you smile faintly at the idea. A cold draft brushes your cheek, reminding you that no matter how many layers you wear, the environment is always looking for an advantage. You hunch your shoulders slightly to keep the warmth trapped. The flicker of the fire draws your gaze. You watch its glow dance across the uneven walls, turning the room into a living lantern. Shadows stretch long, then fade, then stretch again. Everything feels fluid and sleepy. You reach for one final fabric scrap, a small square of wool, and tuck it gently around your neck. That small addition changes everything. Warmth settles in like a guest invited to stay the night. You inhale deeply, letting the layered warmth cradle your ribs. The clothing presses lightly on your skin, firm enough to feel real soft enough to soothe you as you begin to relax. You take a moment to stretch your fingers, pushing them toward the fire until they tingle. Then you tuck them back under the layers, letting them rest against your stomach. The contrast between heat and chill leaves a small pleasant buzz. You feel yourself slowly grounding into the night. In the quiet, you recall a curious detail from earlier in the week. During a communal chore at the frozen stream, an older woman shared that when winters were especially brutal, some families dried nettles and wove the fibres into underlayers for extra warmth. It sounded improbable at first, but the texture of dried nettle fibres when treated properly can be surprisingly soft. The idea lingers in your mind with a soft, earthy charm. You close your eyes, leaning into the layered warmth now hugging your body. The fire crackles behind you, and the smoky air forms a gentle curtain over your senses. You shift your head slightly, finding the sweet spot where the cold cannot sneak in. Your breathing slows into a calm rhythm, and every layer of fabric becomes part of the quiet effort to keep you safe through the long, freezing dark. Your thoughts drift lazily from one image to another. A snow-covered field under starlight, a doorway rimed with frost, the familiar weight of wool against your skin. You listen to the distant wind humming against the thatch, a soft vibration that seems to pass through the walls and into your bones. Despite the cold, you feel held, wrapped in your own small defences. You open your eyes again just long enough to study the glow of the fire as it rests in its low cradle of embers. You feel your clothing warming bit by bit, gathering heat from your own body and keeping it close. The layers are not luxurious, but they are loyal. You nestle deeper into the bedding, still listening to the faint murmurs of the room. Everything slows, everything softens. Wrapped in warmth you created from nothing more than wool linen and patience, you begin to settle into the kind of sleep that feels earned through quiet ritual. You feel the layers hugging close to your body, holding in every scrap of heat, but your attention keeps drifting toward the quiet flicker at the center of the room. The hearth, your lifeline, your rival, your unpredictable companion through every winter night. You shift your shoulders, sit up slightly, and let your gaze settle on the faint glow that pulses like a tired heartbeat in the small stone enclosure. The fire is low now, not dead, just resting. A few glowing coals blink lazily the way an old friend might open an eye to check if you are still there. You scoot closer, letting the warmth brush your chilled feet. It is not enough to chase the cold from the room, but it is enough to remind you that winter cannot claim everything. As you lean forward, you remember something mentioned in a dusty lecture years ago. One well-attested detail found in manorial records explains that peasant families relied heavily on the hearth, not only for heating, but also for regulating their routines, since its dwindling light marked time almost as clearly as the rising sun. You think about that now. The fire is telling you it is time to settle for the night to guard what light you have left, and hope it lasts until dawn. You reach for a small stick resting near the stone base of the hearth, and give the embers a gentle nudge. A soft glow swells, then retreats. Sparks flit upward in tiny bursts, bright and brief, like fireflies caught in a winter dream. The smoke thickens for a heartbeat, and you lean back, closing your eyes against the sting. Breathing through smoke is a skill every villager learns young. It is not comfortable, but it is familiar, almost comforting in its stubbornness. You pull the cloak tighter, then rub your hands together until the friction warms your palms. The fire crackles as though responding to your movement. It is a tender sound, small and reassuring. You think of it as a nighttime companion that tries its best, even when it cannot perform miracles. Your mind drifts to a detail you overheard in the spinning shed last week. According to one old spinner who delights in telling strange tales, some families used to hang small polished stones above the hearth, believing the stones absorbed heat during the day and released it back into the room at night. You doubt the science, but the image lingers. A glimmering little stone warming the dark seems sweet in its own humble way. You shift forward and place a palm near the coals again. The warmth travels up your fingers, melting a little stiffness in your joints. You let out a soft sigh. The house around you settles into its nighttime rhythm. The walls creak as the cold pushes against them, and the roof gives a low groan that makes the thatch quiver. Someone behind you stirs, rearranging their blanket with slow, sleepy movements. The entire space feels alive, breathing with you, creaking with you, shivering with you. The firelight paints long shapes across the packed earthen floor. You trace them with your eyes, letting your thoughts drift wherever the shadows lead. You have always liked this glow. It softens the edges of everything. Even the rough walls look gentler now, washed in gold and dim red. You lean your head back slightly, letting the warmth kiss your chin. You consider how the fire changes your experience of night. Without it, winter settles in like a predator. With it, the darkness feels less threatening, more like a heavy blanket waiting to wrap you up. Researchers who handle climate and livelihood records often point out that for medieval peasants, the hearth served as a psychological anchor as much as a practical tool. You feel that truth now. The fire is not just heat, it is safety. You reach to the side and pick up a small piece of kindling. You weigh it in your palm, light, dry, exactly the kind of wood that catches quickly. You think for a moment, then place it gently onto the waiting embers. The wood does not ignite immediately. It hesitates, darkening slightly at the edges. Then a thin curl of flame edges upward like a shy whisper. You exhale in relief. Even the smallest flame feels like a victory. The flicker enhances the room's warmth by only a margin, but you feel it anyway. Heat travels in tiny threads, weaving through the air before looping around your body. You close your eyes, letting the subtle warmth settle over your cheeks. A smile touches your lips. Not because the fire is strong, but because it is alive, and alive is enough. You stretch your toes toward the heat and wiggle them. Feeling sensations slowly return. You shift your weight on the straw mattress, noticing its familiar rustle. The fire glows brighter for a moment, giving you a clear glimpse of the cluttered corner, where tools lean against the wall. Everything here depends on the fire. Food, water, comfort, rest. Without it, you would be little more than a shivering body wrapped in too much cloth. You take a slow breath and study the smoke curling into the upper beams. It moves with a strange elegance, a drifting ribbon that coils and uncoils as though dreaming. Your mind travels again to an academic conversation you once overheard at the market tavern. A lingering disagreement among archival specialists focuses on how often peasants kept the fire burning overnight and whether families trusted embers alone or assigned a specific person to monitor the flames through the darkest hours. The thought sticks with you. You picture some long-ago villager sitting where you sit now, poking the coals, whispering a soft complaint, then wrapping themselves back in wool. The fire snaps sharply and a small spark leaps to the edge of the hearth. You flinch slightly, then lean forward to nudge it back with the poker. You watch it dissolve into the coals, joining the others in their quiet glow. You grin softly and shake your head. Even sleepy fires have attitude. You adjust your layers again, feeling the warmth slowly accumulate between fabric and skin. You glance around the room. The glow touches the faces of the people sleeping nearby, warming one cheek and leaving the other in shadow. Their breaths form soft rhythms, weaving into the low hum of the crackling wood. It is peaceful in a rugged way, like a lullaby sung by wind and fire together. You inch back toward your bedding, still facing the hearth. The glow acts like a gentle guardian watching over you as you ease down into the straw. You curl onto your side, letting the warmth brush your feet. It will not last long, but that is the nature of winter nights. You take what heat you can when you can. You wrap your arms around yourself and feel the weight of your layers hold steady. You listen to the fire sigh, the embers shift, the night outside press its icy fingers against the walls, and still you feel safe. You let the gentle flicker guide your breathing into a calm and even rhythm. Little by little your mind softens. Your thoughts drift like the smoke above you, wandering, looping, unfurling. The glow becomes a warm blur behind your eyes. You nestle deeper into the bedding, letting the remnants of heat seep into your bones. Tonight the fire is small, but it is yours. Its faint shimmer is enough to guide you into the soft edge of sleep. You settle deeper into the straw, watching the fire's glow ebb into a faint tremble, and your thoughts drift toward the shape beneath your body. Not a bed the way you know it today. Not feathers or springs or soft quilting. Just earth. A packed, flattened platform raised a little from the floor because even the poorest villagers understood that the ground steals warmth like a thief that never sleeps. You shift slightly, feeling the firmness beneath your hip, and let yourself sink into the rough familiarity of it. This sleeping spot is more than dirt. It is a careful arrangement beaten flat with wooden mallets and smoothed over time by bodies that have rested here for generations. There is a quiet practicality in it, and you begin to appreciate the way it supports you with a steady, grounded feeling. A note preserved in early rural surveys describes how these low platforms often functioned as multi-purpose nooks, used for work during the day and for sleep once darkness arrived. You run your fingers over the packed earth, sensing the small bumps and ridges made by years of use. You pull your cloak tighter and shift the straw that softens the surface. A few pieces poke your ribs, so you adjust again until the arrangement feels just right. The sound of the straw crackling beneath you forms a simple bedtime rhythm. The glow of the hearth reaches this corner, only faintly painting your bedding in a warm, muted tone that makes the earth platform feel almost inviting. Your mind wanders to a story a shepherd once shared during a long walk back from the pastures. He claimed that in harsh winters some villagers lined their sleeping platforms with thin layers of dried mullein leaves to create a cushion that stayed warmer than plain straw. You smile gently at the oddness of the idea. Soft leaves hidden under blankets offering a secret layer of comfort that only the sleepers would know about. You stretch your legs within the layers of cloth and feel the earth supporting your weight evenly. There is something grounding about it, almost as if the land itself is holding you steady, while the winter air tries to nibble at your skin. You adjust your position and listen to the crackle of the fire mixing with the distant sigh of wind against the walls. The cold outside presses in, but here on this platform you feel anchored. You run your hand along the packed surface again, noticing how the texture changes in different spots. Some areas feel smooth from years of pressure, others rougher where repairs or new layers of earth were added. You breathe in slowly, letting the smell of smoke and straw drift through your senses. It is a modest place to rest, but it is yours for the night, and that gives it a quiet dignity. You shift your shoulders, settling into a comfortable position. The layers of clothing keep your body warm enough, but the earth beneath you still carries the chill of winter. You curl your knees closer to your chest and tuck your blanket around them. The cold always settles in at the lower edge of your sleeping spot first, and you know how to work against it without thinking. These are habits learned through countless nights. A quiet thought floats through your mind, sparked by something you once overheard at a harvest gathering. Some historians still puzzle over whether these raised platforms were intentionally contoured to help with warmth, or simply formed by repeated use shaped by bodies rather than design. The idea of generations unknowingly sculpting the sleeping place with their own weight adds something strangely poetic to the moment. You feel connected to them in a way that surprises you. You press your palm into the earth, feeling the firmness beneath the thin layer of straw. You imagine the many hands that packed this surface down the many winters that passed over it. This bed is not a luxury, but it is a shared inheritance. You feel its story under your skin. You adjust your blanket again, tightening it under your chin. The fire lets out a small hiss. A tiny ember snaps upward. The air in the room cools little by little, and you become more aware of the heat your body is building for itself. The earth takes some of it, but not all. Enough stays with you to grant comfort. Your gaze drifts upward to the low beams, then back to the straw around you. You shuffle slightly to create a softer nest in one corner of the platform. The straw whispers as you move, adding to the calm soundscape of the room. Someone on the opposite side shifts as well, perhaps chasing warmth the same way you are. Your breathing slows. The packed earth beneath you feels steady, unchanging. It does not mould to your shape, but it accepts your weight. You let yourself soften against it, letting the firmness cradle your spine in a surprisingly soothing way. You close your eyes for a moment, imagining the cold outside retreating just a little. The walls tremble under a wind gust, yet your platform stays steady. You feel the boundary between yourself and the earth blur a little, as though you are sharing heat with the land itself. It is a primitive comfort, but a real one. You nestle deeper into the straw, letting your blanket slide closer around your shoulders. The earth holds firm beneath you, strong and simple. Your breaths fall into rhythm with the faint whisper of wind outside and the last murmurs of the hearth's glow. As the night settles, you feel wrapped not only in fabric and straw, but in the quiet endurance of people who learn to sleep on the ground and call it home. Little by little warmth gathers around your chest. Your thoughts soften. Your body rests. On this humble platform of earth and straw, you begin to drift towards sleep. You pull your blanket a little higher, feeling the cool draft nibble at your ankles, and then you let your hand sink into the straw piled beneath you. It rustles with a dry, papery whisper shifting under your weight, like a restless creature trying to settle in for the night. You lift a handful and let it fall back through your fingers. The texture is scratchy, uneven, and dotted with tiny seeds that cling to your skin. This is your mattress. This is what stands between your body and the biting chill that rises from the earth. You roll onto your side and press your palm firmly into the bedding. The straw gives way, slightly reshaping itself into a shallow cradle around your hip. It is not soft. It is not glamorous. But there is something undeniably comforting about its simple honesty. One common finding in surviving rural inventories notes that straw bedding was replaced several times a year in households that could afford to do so, especially after the damp seasons when mould threatened to settle in. You shift a little, appreciating the dryness of your own bedding tonight. It means the family prepared well before winter tightened its grip. You fluff the straw by lifting the edges and letting air pass through it. The action creates a rising dust that sparkles briefly in the dull firelight. You cough once into your sleeve, then smile at the familiar tickle in your throat. This ritual of fluffing may not seem like much, but every villager knows it can mean the difference between a tolerable night and one filled with small, stubborn aches in the morning. As you adjust the bedding, you remember a curious detail you once heard from a travelling herbalist who stopped in the village. She claimed that some families tucked dried peppermint stems inside their straw mattresses to discourage insects and give off a faint, soothing scent that mingled with the smoke of the hearth. It sounds almost luxurious by your standards, and you wonder briefly what peppermint-scented bedding might feel like on such a cold night. Your own straw carries the more familiar smell of grain fields and winter barns. It is not refreshing, but it is home. You stretch out your legs again, testing the bedding beneath your calves. The straw is prickly in some places, softer in others, a patchwork of textures that shifts with every movement. You tug the blanket closer and settle in. Your fingers absent-mindedly trace the edge of the straw pile, noticing where newer pieces feel fresher, and where older ones have started to break down into finer fibres. You can tell someone recently added a top layer. The brightness of the strands gives it away. A quiet thought slips into your mind, born from a conversation you overheard in the monastery courtyard last autumn. A lingering question among researchers of domestic life is whether medieval peasants deliberately layered their straw in strategic patterns for comfort, or whether the bedding simply evolved into shape through nightly shifting. Records are vague. The surviving notes tell only fragments. You glance down at your bedding, half amused at the idea that future scholars might argue about your sleeping habits, while you simply try to keep your toes warm. You adjust your position once more, sliding an arm under your head. The straw beneath your shoulder responds with a gentle sigh of sound. You hear the faint scurry of a mouse somewhere behind the wall, and try not to think about how much that little creature admires the bedding you are lying on. You tuck your blanket tighter to keep any bold midnight visitor from joining you. Your eyes drift toward the narrow window slit where a thin blade of moonlight slips inside and touches the bedding at your feet. You notice the tiny bits of chaff glinting faintly, small flecks of gold in the quiet dark. The smell of straw mingles with the scent of lingering smoke and a faint trace of wool from your layers. Together they weave a rustic perfume that feels strangely calming. You curl onto your side, tucking your knees closer. The straw crackles beneath you, shifting into a nest-like hollow that matches the curve of your body. It makes you feel cocooned in your own small corner of warmth. You rest your cheek against your forearm and let your breathing fall into a slow, steady rhythm. Something about the steady rustle of the straw helps you unwind. Even the roughness feels right tonight. A memory surfaces from earlier in the week when the older villagers were discussing winter habits near the communal oven. One of them, a wrinkled woman with a sharp laugh, mentioned that in her youth, she once knew a family who combed their straw bedding with an actual wooden rake every few nights to keep it airy and soft. The others teased her, insisting her memory had grown too fanciful, but the image of someone raking their mattress stuck with you. You picture it now, and it almost makes you laugh out loud. A mattress that needs grooming. Yet the more you think about it, the more practical it seems. You let your hand glide across the bedding again, feeling for any lumps or stubborn corners. You push one aside with your fingertips and smooth the straw into a more forgiving shape. The bedding warms slightly as your body heat begins to settle, and you feel the subtle difference where the straw has fluffed just enough to embrace you gently. Your eyelids grow heavier as the night deepens. The fire crackles low, sending soft echoes through the room. A few ashes settle in the hearth, with tiny sounds like quiet footsteps walking away. The walls do not move, yet you feel the house shift in a sleepy way, as though settling its own weight for the night. You shift too, letting the straw cradle you without resistance. A cool breath of air sneaks in near the window and brushes your cheek. You burrow deeper under the blanket, letting the warmth rise around your shoulders. The bedding rustles softly, the sound almost like whispering wheat fields in summer. You close your eyes and imagine the fields swaying under sunlight, the wind warm and full of life. It comforts you more than you expect. You let your thoughts drift through these quiet sensations. The straw beneath you, the warmth of your layers, the slow exhale of the fire, the gentle vibration of winter wind against the walls. Everything blends into a soft rhythm that carries you forward into the night. Your breathing deepens, your muscles loosen. The straw holds your weight with surprising steadiness. As sleep begins to reach for you, you feel a small gratitude for this humble bedding, these dry stalks gathered from the fields. They may be simple, but they make the difference between shivering through the night and drifting into rest. The straw rustles once more as you settle into the most comfortable position you can find. You let your thoughts fall quiet. The room fades, and in the soft cradle of your winter mattress, you begin to drift towards sleep. You lie still for a long moment, feeling the warmth slowly settle into your layered clothing and the straw beneath your body. Then, almost without thinking, you become aware of a familiar rhythm that shapes every winter night in these cottages. Sleep does not arrive all at once. It comes in 2 long waves. A first rest, then waking, then a second descent into dreams. You shift your legs slightly, adjusting the blanket around your shoulders, and take in the quiet room with a new sense of expectation. You know the pattern well, even if no one ever taught it to you outright. Your breathing evens out as you settle deeper into your bedding. The fire murmurs in its low cradle of embers. Someone across the room emits a soft snore followed by an involuntary grunt. You smile lazily. This is the start of the first sleep, the gentle slide into darkness that all villagers recognize. A detail mentioned in old medical treatises notes that interrupted sleep was considered natural, even healthy, and many households treated the waking period between the 2 phases as a quiet window for reflection or prayer. You wonder how strange it must seem to someone used to a single unbroken night. You adjust your cloak and feel the heat slowly building under your layers. Your eyelids droop. The crackle of the fire drifts into a softer hum. You relax your shoulders, letting them melt into the bedding. The cool air still creeps along the floor, nibbling at your toes, but it no longer feels hostile. It feels simply like part of the night. Your thoughts grow loose and soft, wandering through memories without urgency. As you hover on the edge of sleep, an odd detail rises from a conversation you heard earlier in the month. A huntsman swore that some villagers used to place a small carved wooden figure near their bed to encourage dreams of warmth and good fortune during the first sleep. It sounded like superstition, yet you picture the small carving now and feel a strange comfort in the idea of a tiny guardian watching over the night. Your breathing deepens, your body grows heavier. The room fades into a haze of sound and shadow. For a while you drift easily, sinking into the first stretch of sleep as though it lifts you in its quiet arms. The fire sighs occasionally and your dreams begin to gather from the corners of your mind. They are simple dreams rooted in the rhythm of the season, the glint of frost, the murmur of a distant stream, the scent of warm bread from a feast long gone. Then, without warning, the first sleep loosens its hold. You open your eyes to a dim glow. You do not feel startled. This pause in the night is simply expected, a normal part of winter rest. The entire cottage seems to exhale with you, half awake, half still in the world of dreams. A question sometimes raised among historians of daily life lingers in your thoughts. Did medieval families value this waking interval for conversation or tasks, or did they greet it with quiet resignation? The old records offer no single answer, and you imagine the truth varied from home to home. You shift your body, carefully mindful of the cold that sneaks into movement. The straw rustles beneath you, releasing a faint scent of dried grass that mingles with smoke. You pull your blanket up to your chin and lie on your back, staring toward the low rafters. A thin ribbon of moonlight stretches across one beam, illuminating a patch of frost that glitters faintly like powdered glass. The sight steadies you. It feels like the world outside pauses just long enough to let you admire it. A soft noise breaks the silence. Someone coughs lightly, then settles again. Another sleeper mutters a half-formed word and rolls over. You feel less alone in your wakefulness. Your mind floats easily, neither truly alert nor fully dreaming. You enjoy this brief in-between state, a small island of calm where the cold cannot reach your deeper thoughts. You rub your hands together gently, feeling the warmth return to your palms. You adjust your feet beneath the blanket, curling your toes to stir the warmth gathered there. The fire glows faintly, a watcher in the corner, too tired to blaze but too stubborn to die. You listen to the quiet rise and fall of its breathing. The sound soothes you, smoothing out the returning edges of fatigue. Your thoughts drift again, looser now, wandering like flakes caught in a soft wind. You remember a remark made by a visiting scribe last spring. He had told a small gathering that some manuscripts suggested peasants use this waking period to check on animals' tend embers or whisper quiet stories meant only for the night. You imagine those scenes. A soft conversation by the fire, a gentle lullaby, a handful of whispered secrets too shy for daylight. You let your eyes fall closed again, letting the warmth of your breath gather under the blanket. Your mind lightens. The stillness deepens. The quiet reaches under your ribs and settles there. You feel the subtle pull of the second sleep like a warm tide moving slowly through your thoughts. Everything softens in its wake. You take one last slow breath, long enough to feel your chest rise and fall in the dim air. The silence folds around you. The fire emits one soft pop as if giving permission. You curl onto your side, finding the warm hollow your body left earlier. The straw nestles closer, cradling you with its familiar rustle. Your limbs grow heavy once more, sinking into the promise of deeper rest. And so you slip gently into the second sleep, wrapped in layers, held by the earth beneath you, warmed by the faint heartbeat of the hearth. The night carries you without effort, guiding you back into dreams woven from winter firelight and the steady rhythms of the medieval world. You sink deeper into your bedding, letting the second sleep tug gently at your senses, but before it fully settles, you feel a shift in the warmth around you. A subtle change, a soft presence, a familiar weight pressing closer at your back. It is not an extra blanket. It is a person. Then another, and another. Bodies edging nearer, settling into a shared cocoon of heat that no single sleeper could produce alone. You do not find it strange. This is how winter nights work for families who live by necessity rather than comfort. You adjust slightly to make room for the small elbow nudging your ribs. A child curls beside your knees. Someone's foot brushes your ankle. You feel the steady rhythm of breathing around you, each breath feeding the collective warmth like small, steady embers. A detail frequently noted in accounts of rural living mentions that entire households often slept together in close bundles not out of sentimentality, but because shared heat could mean the difference between a manageable night and a dangerous one. You feel the truth of that in the gentle rise of warmth around you now. You shift your blanket so it covers the shoulders of the person closest to you. The straw rustles softly beneath the group, adjusting to the weight of several bodies instead of one. It is not a perfect arrangement. Knees collide, elbows wander, blankets are tugged sideways. Yet somehow it becomes comfortable, a hive of quiet breath and shared survival. The fire's glow is faint now, painting the bodies around you in soft shapes and golden outlines. You watch for a moment, noting how the dim light settles on faces, catching on cheekbones, brushing across hair, fading into shadows. You hear a small whisper from someone half asleep. They murmur a word you cannot quite grasp, then drift off again. The closeness makes every sound intimate. You curl an arm around your chest, mindful of the space. Someone's hand grazes your shoulder, searching in their sleep for warmth before settling again. You smile lazily. You have grown used to these nightly collisions. When winter is at its coldest, personal boundaries shrink and warmth becomes a shared resource, not an individual luxury. Your mind drifts to something you once heard from an elderly woman who had lived through 60 winters. She claimed that her grandparents taught her a tiny trick for staying warm in large sleeping bundles. They would twist their woolen cloaks around the group like a shared cocoon, creating pockets of trapped heat that lasted until morning. You think of that now, imagining how the fabric must have wrapped them like a giant sprawling nest. You shift your leg slightly, and the child beside you instinctively moves closer, pressing their back against your thigh. Their warmth radiates upwards, surprising in its intensity. You place a gentle hand on their shoulder and feel the soft swell of their breath. The contact helps your own body relax. The wind outside presses against the shutters again, a long sigh that makes the walls tremble. You barely feel the draft this time. The group's combined heat forms a quiet barrier that pushes the cold away. You tuck your chin deeper into your blanket and listen to the soft chorus of different breathing patterns around you. Slow breaths, quick breaths, occasional soft snores, all weaving together in the dark. You think back to a question sometimes raised in the study of domestic relations. Some researchers wonder if these nightly sleeping bundles strengthened emotional ties, or simply made them more complicated. There is little clear evidence, only fragments from letters and confessions and local folklore. You imagine the truth lies somewhere in between. Closeness breeds warmth, but also friction. Yet on nights like this, everyone seems grateful for the nearness, even if no one says it aloud. You tilt your head slightly and feel a soft puff of air from the person breathing just behind you. Their presence is steady, anchoring you gently. You close your eyes and allow the rhythm to lull you. The warmth builds slowly like a tide rising around your ribs. Your fingers relax, your shoulders soften. The anxiety of the cold night eases. The straw shifts again as the group settles. Someone turns over, tugging the blanket with them. You feel a tiny invasion of cold air along your side, but quickly cover it with your cloak. Warmth fills the space again in a few breaths. The way your bodies naturally adjust to each other feels instinctive, almost choreographed without intention. You hear a faint giggle from the child, perhaps caught in a dream. You smile into the darkness. The presence of others comforts you in a way solitary sleep never could during winter. You feel sheltered, surrounded, part of a small living cluster of warmth, bound together by necessity and the gentle intention to protect each other through the coldest hours. You breathe deeply. The blend of warmth wool and lingering smoke wraps you in a slow calm. The fire barely glows now, but it does not matter. The bodies around you produce enough heat to make the night livable. You think briefly of summer nights when sleeping apart is possible, even pleasant, but winter steals that choice. Winter turns humans into small constellations of shared heat. A soft snore erupts near your ear, startling you for a moment before fading into the background. You chuckle silently into your blanket, then relax again. Your body nestles deeper among the others. The straw molds around your combined shapes, giving way, where necessary, supporting where needed. Your eyelids grow heavy, and the world narrows into a quiet warmth. The breathing around you forms a soft lullaby. You let the comfort seep into your bones, melting the last pockets of cold that cling to your skin. You feel yourself drawing closer to the border of sleep, Wrapped in a pile of Lim's blankets and shared breath, you surrender to the warmth of the group. The night holds you gently, and the second sleep begins to pull you into its soft, glowing depths. You rest in the tangled warmth of shared bodies for a while, your breathing slow, and even when another kind of comfort begins to seep into your awareness. Heat. Not human heat this time, a different kind altogether. A steady, gentle warmth radiating from the far side of the cottage wall. You shift slightly, one hand brushing the floor, and feel it again. A faint pulse of heat drifting through timber and packed clay. You know exactly where it comes from. The stable stands on the other side. You breathe in through your nose, catching the faint scent of animals drifting through the wall. Hay, dried dung, warm fur mingling with winter air. Not unpleasant at night, just familiar. A detail preserved in early farmstead descriptions notes that many medieval cottages were built directly against small byres, so that the heat from livestock would seep into living spaces during winter. You feel that truth settling into your bones now. The animals do not know they're helping you sleep, yet their warmth is as reliable as the fire you tend inside. You shift your body closer to the wall without disturbing the sleepers around you. The warmth is subtle, gentle, a slow, lingering glow that feels more dependable than the fading embers in the hearth. You close your eyes and imagine the cows lying down for the night, their bodies vast reservoirs of heat, their breath rising in slow clouds in the dark stable. The sound of hooves shifting softly through straw is faint but steady. It comforts you almost as much as the human warmth at your back. Someone beside you moves, pulling the blanket over both of you. The straw rustles. A small foot presses against your calf. You keep your eyes closed, letting the warmth from the animals seep through the wall and wrap itself around your shoulders like a protective hand. You think briefly of a strange tip passed along by an elderly cart driver once. He claimed that in especially brutal winters some families even slept directly above the stable on makeshift lofts, letting the animals' combined heat rise and envelop them. You picture yourself curled above a slumbering cow, and although the idea seems odd, you can see the logic. Warmth is warmth, wherever it comes from. A soft rhythm of shifting weight carries through the wall. The animals are resettling, probably nudging hay with their snouts, or stomping one hoof in a slow, sleepy gesture. The vibrations travel into the wooden frame of your cottage, faint enough to blend with your own heartbeat. You find yourself sinking with it, your breaths lengthening until everything feels like one gentle rhythm. You curl your fingers along the floor, letting the clay absorb your body heat while returning a little warmth from the stable. There is something grounding about knowing the animals are there. Creatures who do not complain about the cold, who simply breathe and eat and rest, trusting the night to pass. A calmness spreads through you. Winter feels less threatening, with a silent herd standing guard on the other side of the wall. You adjust your legs beneath the blanket, making sure the draft cannot reach you. The room is quiet, except for the occasional rustle of straw and the distant hum of the animals. The fire is nearly out now. Only a few faint red coals glow in the hearth, too tired to give more than a whisper of warmth. But that does not trouble you. The wall at your side feels like a large living furnace, steady and patient, warming the night without flickering. A thought drifts through your mind, sparked by something you once heard at the harvest feast. A lingering question among those who study early agricultural life is whether peasants intentionally planned their living arrangements to capture livestock heat, or whether the layouts merely evolved out of necessity and limited space. You imagine a cluster of homes built close to animals because there was nowhere else to put them, and the coincidence slowly turning into a winter advantage. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between design and practicality. Your breathing deepens as the warmth spreads through your limbs. You picture the animals again, their quiet presence just beyond the wall. A cow sighs heavily, and the sound reaches you in a soft vibration. You smile faintly. Even half asleep, they seem to say everything is fine. The night is still long, but it is manageable. You shift onto your back and study the ceiling. Smoke stains darken the beams. A few pieces of straw cling to the rafters, probably flung upward during the day's chores. The faint light from the dying fire outlines the shapes overhead, giving the room a soft, dreamlike haze. You let your thoughts float with the shadows, feeling your eyes grow heavier. Someone beside you whispers a sleepy complaint, then settles again, their forehead resting lightly against your shoulder. The combined warmth of the sleepers and the gentle heat from the stable begins to create a small pocket of comfort that feels almost luxurious compared to the harsh cold outside. You exhale and feel your chest relax fully. Your body has everything it needs to surrender to sleep now. Warmth, shelter, company. Steady breaths, rising and falling all around you. The wall beside you emits a faint creak as one of the animals shifts its weight. You imagine it turning in the straw, flicking its tail once before settling again. The closeness feels almost like a lullaby. A large creature breathing in the dark, offering warmth without ever knowing it. You nestle deeper into the bedding and pull the blanket over your ear. The presence of your family around you feels reassuring. You feel the heat of their bodies blending with the warmth from the stable until the air around you becomes a small refuge against the winter night. The room grows softer, quieter. You hear only slow breaths and the faintest rustle of straw on both sides of the wall. Your eyelids droop. Your limbs grow heavy. The warmth wraps around you, soothing every cold ache that clung to your bones earlier. You let your thoughts drift aimlessly through memories of fields, animals, and daytime chores. They stretch out like ribbons in your mind, then dissolve into soft shapes you can no longer name. A final sigh rises from the stable low and comforting like a giant calming the darkness. You smile one last time into your blanket. Everything feels steady. Everything feels safe. The warmth cradles you from both sides and your body finally loosens its last defences. Held between your family and the silent, gentle heat of the animals, you drift into a deep, quiet sleep that belongs only to winter nights in the medieval world. You drift in and out of the warmth in a sleepy haze wrapped in layers of breath and blankets, when your ears begin to attune to the tapestry of sounds that fills a medieval winter night. At first, it is only silence, a thick, soft quiet that feels as cold as the frost outside. Then the quiet begins to ripple, revealing small noises that rise gently into your awareness. Every cottage breathes in its own way, and tonight yours seems full of murmurs waiting to be heard. You blink slowly in the dim glow of the nearly spent embers. The fire emits a faint crackle so soft it feels like it belongs to your dreams. The bodies around you shift with sleepy unease. Someone exhales through their nose, making a small fluttering sound. Another sleeper releases a low hum, perhaps speaking to someone in a dream. You smile into the darkness, feeling the edges of waking curiosity tug at you. Your focus drifts upward to the low rafters, where a faint scratching makes you lift your eyebrows. A tiny creature, perhaps a mouse or a small bird seeking shelter from the cold, is exploring the roof. In accounts of everyday rural life, observers often mentioned how homes, however humble, served as miniature ecosystems where animals and humans coexisted through the winter months. You hear that reality now in the light fluttering scratches just above your head. You shift slightly, adjusting the blanket around your shoulders. The straw beneath you rustles with each movement, the crisp sound blending with the faint drip of melting frost from the top of the thatch. You listen as the drip slows, then stops, replaced by the soft hum of wind brushing along the roof. The cottage creaks in quiet response, as though sighing at the pressure of the cold pressing in from outside. You let your ears wander further, seeking the faintest noises. The stable wall beside you murmurs with gentle animal sounds. A cow sleeps and exhales, creating a soft gust of breath that seems to echo through the wooden boards. A chicken shifts on its perch, its claws making tiny clicks in the bedding. These small noises feel steady and grounding. They remind you that life even in winter does not retreat completely. It simply grows quieter. From somewhere beyond the cottage walls comes a distant bark. A dog likely guarding a neighbour's home breaks the silence for a brief moment before falling quiet again. That sound sends a faint shiver up your arms, not out of fear, but because it reminds you that the village remains awake in its own scattered ways, each home with its own noise, its own heartbeat. You turn your head slightly and notice the soft wheeze of an elderly family member sleeping nearby. Their breathing forms a slow, rhythmic pulse that makes your own breath fall into sync. A fold of blanket shifts as they move the fabric, brushing against wool with a muted rasp. You find yourself soothed by the familiarity of it. Your ears pick up another layer of sound, a faint tapping. You tilt your head, listening more closely. After a few moments, you realize it is the shutter bumping softly in the wind. The latch holds, but the wood flexes with the cold, creating a gentle, irregular pattern. You feel a small comfort in the repetition, like a slow, sleepy, drum-marking time through the night. Your mind drifts back to something you once heard at a feast, when an elderly storyteller claimed that the sounds of winter nights carried meanings if you listened long enough. He insisted that certain creaks in the rafters were signs of approaching storms, while the flutter of small animals near the roof warned of shifting weather patterns. You smile at the memory, unsure whether he spoke truth or simply enjoyed the sound of his own stories. You picture him now waving his hands near the fire, claiming he could predict snow by the tone of a distant owl. You listen harder, hoping for an owl call of your own. A minute passes, then 2. The air remains silent. Then soft and trembling, a faint hooting sound reaches you through the cold. It is distant, barely audible, but enough to draw a warm hum of recognition in your chest. You wonder if the storyteller would smile knowingly at this. A question occasionally raised in the study of rural soundscapes crosses your thoughts. Some researchers try to understand how families navigated sleep when homes were full of noise from both inside and outside. Were these sounds comforting or distracting? Did people grow accustomed to them? Or did they interpret each one as a sign from the world beyond the village? As you lie here listening to the layers of quiet noise, you sense that the truth is a blend of both. Some sounds soothe, some warn, most simply exist. You tighten your blanket against your chest as the wind hums again outside. It sounds like a long, tired breath sliding across the frozen fields. You imagine it carrying snowflakes and dust brushing against fences and cottages as it moves. The wind is a singer, and tonight its voice is gentle. A sleeper near your shoulder mumbles something indistinct, perhaps a fragment of a family name or a line from a dream. You feel the warmth of their breath against your arm. Someone farther away shifts heavily, causing the straw to shift in a slow wave beneath the group. A sleepy cough follows low and brief. You take a slow breath, letting the noise wash over you. Every small sound becomes a note in a quiet winter song. You listen to the hiss of your own inhalation, then the slow warmth of your exhale filling the small space beneath your blanket. Your heartbeat joins the rhythm, steady and calm. Your mind wanders again, gently tethered to the sounds around you. A faint patter on the thatch makes you open your eyes. It is not rain. It is frost loosening and sliding down the roof in tiny crystals. The sound is soft, like distant footsteps across delicate ground. You let it soothe you, imagining the frost melting under the faint warmth of your home. You close your eyes fully now, letting the tapestry of nighttime sounds anchor you. The crackle of dying embers, the rustle of straw, the whisper of wind, the sigh of animals through the wall, the shifting bodies of sleepers. This is the orchestra of winter nights, one that has played for centuries, wrapping its listeners in a soft, protective hush. Your breath deepens. The sounds grow distant. The warmth settles around your body like a cocoon. And as your awareness softens, you find yourself drifting into sleep once more, carried on the quiet music of a medieval night. You lie quietly, letting the soft layers of sound fade into the background, when your thoughts drift towards something every medieval villager understands on a bone-deep level. Remedies, little tricks, homemade comforts that help you push through the coldest nights. As the room settles into its midnight stillness, you shift your weight and reach for the small cloth pouch tucked beside your bedding. It holds dried herbs gathered long before winter arrived. You loosen the string and inhale the faint, earthy fragrance that rises from within. The scent is gentle but familiar, a whisper of summer captured in brittle leaves. You crush a pinch between your fingers and breathe in again, letting the fragrance warm your senses. According to notes preserved in old household manuals, peasants often relied on simple plant remedies to soothe their winter discomfort, especially when sleep felt elusive. The herbs were not magic, but their scents calmed the mind. You feel that calm beginning to spread through you now. You close the pouch and tuck it back under your blanket. The warmth of your fingers lingers on the wool as you settle again. A soft breeze dances under the door and you shiver, pulling the blanket higher. The cold reaches for you, but the small ritual of the herbs has created a thin shield of comfort around your mind. Your thoughts drift to the memory of a peculiar conversation at the autumn market. A cheerful brewer claimed that some villagers swore by a cup of gently warmed ale before bed, believing it made sleep heavier and dreams sweeter. You had laughed at his enthusiasm, but tonight you imagine the taste of that warm drink and feel a tiny spark of longing. Sometimes warmth comes from the simplest places. You lie back and let your gaze wander across the shadowed room. The embers glow faintly like sleepy eyes peeking through the dark. You listen to the breathing around you, steady, rhythmic. Human warmth mingles with the fading scent of herbs. Your senses begin to relax. You stretch your toes beneath the blanket and feel the cold air waiting just outside the layers. Nights like this always bring out the little tricks families pass from one generation to the next. You recall something a plump baker once told you while trading bread for flax. She insisted that rubbing a small dab of warm tallow on the soles of your feet before sleep helped trap heat in the body. You had not believed her then, yet you think of it now with new appreciation. These small rituals make winter bearable. You rub your hands together beneath the covers, allowing friction and fabric to build a gentle heat across your palms. The warmth spreads through your fingers, loosening the stiffness that winter likes to settle into joints. Someone beside you shifts and mumbles, drawing your attention back to the quiet room. You watch as their breathing calms again, the faint movement of their chest rising and falling beneath the blanket. A slow thought drifts through your mind, sparked by comments made in a weather-beaten manuscript read aloud by a travelling monk. A lingering point of curiosity for researchers is how much these small winter remedies truly helped peasants sleep, or whether belief in them did most of the work. The written evidence is thin. You imagine some future scholar squinting at the faint ink of a forgotten notebook and wondering if peasants really fell asleep more easily after sniffing thyme or sipping warm ale. You smile faintly, feeling the warmth of your herb pouch beside you. Maybe both body and belief work together. Your breathing slows as you sink deeper into the blankets. A faint soreness in your shoulders reminds you of the daily labour that fills the hours before night arrives. You shift to ease the pressure and gently massage your own arms, moving your fingers in circles along the tired muscles. The motion sends ripples of warmth through your limbs. A simple remedy, yet effective. Your grandmother once insisted that a short self-massage at night helped keep winter aches from settling into your body. You believe her now, remembering how stiff you felt the last time you forgot. Your eyes drift toward the door where a faint draught brushes the edge of the floor. You tuck your blanket tighter around your legs. The cold in this cottage is stubborn, a visitor who refuses to stay outside, yet you meet it with quiet strategies, layers, heat from animals, warm herbs, the smell of wool. These tiny defences form a barrier that keeps sleep within reach. You shift your thoughts toward the memory of a strange winter charm you heard about during a harvest gathering. A shepherd claimed that some families tied small bundles of rowan twigs above their beds to keep nightmares away. He spoke with such conviction that you imagined him hanging the charm every year with ritual solemnity. You look around your cottage now, half expecting to see a twig bundle near the rafters. There is none yet. The memory comforts you all the same. People across the village cling to traditions in their own quiet ways. You feel your breathing deepen, drifting into a slow rhythm. The warmth from your group nestles around you, blending with the faint heat from the animals through the wall. The herbs you crushed earlier leave a gentle fragrance lingering on your fingers, and you bring your hand to your nose once more, letting the scent draw you towards sleep. A soft sound breaks the silence. The faint creak of a wooden ladle drying near the hearth. It shifts slightly, perhaps touched by the last scrap of warm air rising from the embers. The noise comforts you, reminding you that even small household objects join the nightly soundscape. Everything in the cottage lives through winter with you. You relax your jaw, loosening the tension that winter often builds there. Your tongue rests softly. Your breath becomes slower. You feel yourself gliding deeper into the edge of sleep. The cold tries again to sneak through a gap in the blanket, but your warmed layers hold steady. You tuck one hand beneath your cheek and let the faint scent of herbs mingle with wool. Somewhere near the far corner, a sleeper quietly mutters a half-formed word. Another exhales in a steady rhythm that forms a soft lull. You're cocooned within these simple sounds. You adjust your hips, settling into the nest of straw, feeling the texture of the dried stalks beneath your layers. The smell of hearth smoke wraps itself like a light veil around the room. Your eyelids grow heavy. Your thoughts drift slower. Each remedy, each small comfort, each piece of quiet wisdom passed through the village has done its part. The herbs calm your mind. The warmth from the wall soothes your chest. The quiet breathing of your family folds gently around you. You surrender to the softness. Your body relaxes inch by inch. The night feels less sharp, less intrusive. The remedies have done their work, weaving a delicate bridge between the cold and your longing for rest. Wrapped in warmth and whispers, you let yourself drift once more towards sleep, carried by the quiet promise of winter night comforts. You breathe slowly, the soft herbal scent fading into the smoky air when a different kind of presence begins to settle around the room. Not a person, not an animal. something older, quieter, shaped from stories that drift through winter villages like wandering shadows. You shift slightly, adjusting your blanket, and sense how darkness seems to thicken just a little, taking on a texture that feels almost watchful. This is the hour when imaginations stir, when a cold night invites old tales to slip quietly into your thoughts. Your eyelids hover half-closed as you listen to the wind tapping gently against the shutters. The sound reminds you of a tale told at last year's midwinter feast, when a woodsman claimed the wind carried the voices of ancestral spirits, checking on the living during the deepest cold. The others at the feast had laughed, but you remember the woodsman's tone steady and certain. You think of it now, and the idea feels strangely comforting. Winter is easier to bear when you imagine it filled with unseen guardians rather than empty cold. You shift your hand across the straw, letting the dry stalks whisper between your fingers. Someone nearby murmurs in their sleep, and the tiny half-formed sound wanders through the room like a ghost of a thought. You smile faintly at that. According to several accounts collected from early parish records, villagers often believed that winter nights blurred the line between dreams and the waking world, and that spirits sometimes drifted near the edges of sleep. You have no desire to prove or deny the idea. Tonight it simply feels like part of the landscape. A sudden creak from the rafters makes you lift your eyebrows. Not loud, not alarming, just enough to nudge your imagination awake. You picture a small, mischievous household spirit perched above you, shifting its weight while deciding whether your family has been tidy enough to deserve protection from the cold. One of the older women in the village once insisted such spirits existed, claiming they knocked on beams when they wanted offerings of breadcrumbs. You consider leaving a few crumbs near the hearth tomorrow just in case. You close your eyes briefly, letting these half-mythical thoughts drift around you. They do not frighten you. They feel like old companions in the winter dark. Whispered stories meant to explain the things villagers could hear but not see. You inhale deeply, the warmth of your breath rising in the cold air like a small cloud. A quiet memory surfaces, something you once heard in the monastery garden while carrying water. A travelling scholar mapping winter folklore mentioned that researchers still puzzle over how widespread these beliefs truly were, and whether families created them to soothe children or reassure themselves. The surviving evidence is inconsistent, scattered through folk songs and half-faded marginal notes. You imagine future scholars squinting at those notes, trying to decide which fears were real and which were stories born from long nights. You shift again, rolling gently to face the wall warmed by the animals. The heat comforts you, but your mind wanders toward the darker corners of the cottage. Those corners feel deeper tonight, as if the shadows stretch toward your bedding. You watch as the faintest ember light flickers across the far wall, creating shapes that look almost alive. A crooked silhouette that could be a hunched figure. Another that resembles a long-reaching arm. You blink, and the shapes dissolve into ordinary shadows. You let out a soft breath, amused at your sleepy imagination. The wind outside rises for a moment, brushing across the cottage with a low, echoing hum. It sounds like a long-distant voice. You tuck your blanket closer around your shoulders. You do not feel fear, only a gentle tremor of awareness that you are small in a world full of mysteries. Winter nights tend to remind you of that. Someone near the hearth shifts abruptly, making the straw rustle in a sudden wave. They mutter a word you cannot understand, then settle back into deep breathing. You listen to the sound, letting it reassure you. The presence of your sleeping family keeps your mind anchored even as your thoughts drift through the realm of winter tales. You think again of the old woodsman, the one who insisted that the cold season carried hidden visitors. He had described how on certain nights he could hear faint footsteps in the snow outside, even when no person or animal was near. You remember the way his eyes had glittered in the firelight as he spoke, half amused, half serious. You glance toward the door now. You hear nothing but wind. Still, the memory lingers like a small spark of wonder. A new sound tickles your ears. The faint flap of something near the roof. A bird, a loose thatch reed. You cannot tell. You imagine a winter spirit brushing past the beams, checking that the people beneath are sleeping safely. The idea makes you smile again. Sometimes imagining benevolent watchers is easier than believing the cold is empty. You adjust your position and feel the layered warmth surrounding your body. The closeness of your family, the gentle heat from the animals through the wall, the blanket tucked up to your chin, all create a warm island in the middle of a winter world full of stories. You inhale again, letting the air warm your lungs before exhaling slowly. Your breath becomes the rhythm guiding you through the darkness. The cottage groans softly, its old timbers shifting as the temperature drops outside. In summer, such noises go unnoticed. In winter, they stir ancient imaginations. You picture the house settling its bones, whispering to itself about the cold. You almost whisper back. Your eyelids droop as weariness returns. The tales that wandered through your thoughts begin to fade, replaced by a thicker, sleepier calm. You nestle into the straw, letting it cradle your shoulder. You tuck your toes beneath the blanket, where the warmth gathers like a small hidden treasure. The night's shadows feel less watchful now, more like old friends keeping quiet company. Your thoughts slow. Your breath deepens. Whatever stories lived in the darkness slip gently away as you move closer to sleep. Wrapped in warmth, listening to the soft murmurs of the cottage, you let your mind drift once more into the safe, quiet depths of night. You shift your weight gently, letting the warmth around you settle again when a tiny itch interrupts the calm. It begins on your wrist, subtle at first, then sharp enough to demand a faint scratch. You try to ignore it, but another tingle joins in on your shoulder, and suddenly you remember a truth every medieval sleeper accepts with weary resignation. Winter nights may be cold, but they are never entirely free of company you did not invite. You lift your hand from beneath the blanket and rub the itchy spot through your sleeve. The movement stirs the straw softly beneath you. You sigh, not with frustration, but with the quiet patience of someone who knows this battle well. According to observations recorded in early household notes, nearly all rural homes shared one constant nuisance during winter months: tiny creatures that loved warmth as much as humans did. Lice, fleas, mites, little biting passengers that followed you from field to bed. You scratch lightly again, careful not to wake the sleepers pressed close on both sides. The sensation fades for a moment, replaced by the mild warmth of friction. You let your hand fall back under the covers and pull the wool tighter around your neck. Yet your mind remains alert, roaming through memories of the day when you shook out your bedding in the cold air, hoping to chase away a few unwanted visitors. It helped, but never fully. A faint rustle in the thatch above you makes you glance upward for a moment. Not an alarming sound. Probably just a small creature shifting in the roof, seeking its own pocket of warmth. A farmer once told you that winter brought not only cold, but also a hidden migration of tiny pests searching for shelter. You believe him now, listening to the small scurry overhead. You feel a tiny tickle along your rib and gently scratch again. A sleepy sigh escapes someone nearby. Their shifting elbow brushes your side and sends a small wave of warmth across your blanket. You remain still, not wanting to disturb the delicate balance of shared heat. The itch returns on your forearm lighter this time, and you rub the spot through your sleeve with small patient circles. It is part of the night, an annoyance you manage quietly. You inhale deeply, letting the smoky scent of the hearth mingle with the faint musk of wool. Stray strands of straw poke through the layers beneath your body, making a soft scratching sound as you shift. Your skin feels warm in some places, cool in others, and occasionally a tiny creature uses the warmth to wander. You manage each sensation as calmly as you breathe. Your thoughts wander to a curious detail a travelling peddler once shared, in a tone half amused, half sympathetic. He claimed some villagers sprinkled crushed fern leaves in their bedding, during winter, believing it discouraged pests from lingering. You imagine the scent of dried fern mixing with smoke and wool. You would try it if you had any left from summer, but winter strips choices away, leaving only patience and woolen layers. You scratch lightly at the base of your neck, then let your hand rest again. The warmth of your family surrounds you, soft and dense, making it easier to ignore the small itches. A cousin once told you that scratching too much made pests more lively, as if they enjoyed the attention. You smile faintly at the memory, unsure whether he spoke truth or mischief. A slow chill slides along your feet as someone shifts the blanket slightly. You tuck your toes closer to your body and feel the warmth return slowly. The itch near your wrist fades. Another appears briefly near your elbow, then disappears on its own. You breathe calmly through each one. These tiny disruptions belong to winter just as much as frost smoke and darkness. A thought surfaces from something you overheard at the monastery during a bread delivery. A few scholars studying domestic habits wondered aloud how peasants remained patient through nights filled with pests and discomfort. One of the monks had laughed and replied that routine makes even irritation become background noise. You feel that truth now. You accept each itch as part of the winter soundtrack, nothing more. The fire murmurs faintly in the hearth. The embers glow in soft bursts. Someone in the group bundle mumbles a word, then quiets again. The warmth around you continues to build, pushing back the cold in slow waves. In this little nest of straw and wool, even the pests lose some of their menace. They are simply part of the story. You shift your position slightly to relieve a faint pressure on your hip. The straw rustles beneath your back and the sound blends with the gentle breathing around you. For a moment, the sensation of an itch flickers and then fades, completely replaced by a slow warmth spreading along your shoulders. Your hand drifts to your collar, checking for any movement. Nothing there now. You close your eyes, letting your body rest again without worry. Winter nights are imperfect, but they carry their own kind of tenderness. You handle the discomfort the same way you handle the cold, with quiet persistence. A faint tickle brushes your ankle, but this time you simply shift your foot and let the sensation fade. The warmth surrounding you is stronger than the irritation. You feel your body relax again, sinking slowly into a calmer rhythm. You exhale a long, steady breath, the kind that empties your mind as much as your lungs. The cottage settles, the wind quiets. Even the tiny creatures seem to pause. Wrapped in layers, nestled among your family, warmed by wool and closeness, you feel your mind drift once more toward the soft edge of sleep. Imperfect comfort is still comfort. You let yourself sink into it. Your eyelids grow heavy, the last traces of irritation dissolving into the softness of the night. The straw cradles your body. The warmth holds your ribs. Your breath slows. You let the darkness invite you back into rest, accepting every part of the night, even the tiny visitors, as you glide towards sleep once more. You settle again into the quiet warmth, letting the last lingering itch fade into memory. And then you turn your attention to one of the most precious possessions in the entire cottage. The blankets. Not the heavy quilts of a later centuries, not feather-filled comforts, but humble patchwork coverings stitched together from scraps-worn garments and whatever cloth a family could salvage across the years. You pull yours closer to your chin, feeling the uneven textures brush against your skin. Some squares feel soft, others coarse, each carrying its own small history. You shift your hands along the blanket, tracing the seams where different fabrics meet. A square of faded blue wool sits beside a fraying piece of brown linen. A narrow strip of old cloak forms the edge. These pieces did not begin life together, yet here they are stitched into a single shield against the winter cold. In a surviving inventory of rural households from centuries ago, there is a simple but telling observation that most families owned only 1 or 2 blankets, often repaired countless times until barely recognizable. You feel the truth of that now in the way the layers overlap unevenly. Someone beside you stirs, tugging a corner of the blanket with sleepy instinct. You gently pull it back, careful not to disturb them. The fabric whispers through your fingers, carrying the faint scent of smoke and age. Every patch holds warmth in its own way, and together they create something far more valuable than the sum of their scraps. You nestle deeper into it, grateful not only for the heat, but also for the familiar weight. Your thoughts drift to a story told by a spinner near the communal well last spring. She claimed that when a blanket became too worn to repair, families would cut it into strips and weave those strips into a new one, creating a lineage of warmth that stretched across generations. You imagine your own blankets carrying fragments of old winter nights, linking you to ancestors through quiet threads of fabric. The image fills you with a soft, sleepy warmth. You stretch your legs under the blanket, adjusting the folds so the warmth spreads evenly. The straw beneath you shifts with a gentle crackle. You slide your hand across the edge of the blanket again, feeling the slight roughness where the last patch was sewn. Someone in the cottage likely worked on that patch by the faint light of a tallow candle, repairing it stitch by stitch, determined to keep the cold at bay. You feel a faint admiration for those patient hands. A subtle note of curiosity pulls at your mind as you think of a discussion you overheard outside the churchyard during harvest time. Several people debated whether peasants layered their blankets with specific fabrics, facing inward for maximum warmth, or if they simply used whatever scraps they had, letting the natural shape of the blanket decide. The question remains open in the minds of those who study daily life, with no clear answer from surviving records. You look at your own blanket, amused at the idea that its patchwork pattern might one day spark scholarly debates. You shift to your side, letting the blanket wrap snugly around your shoulders. The warmth gathers under your chin, protected from the cold breath slipping through the shutter crack. You pull the edge of the blanket between your fingers, rubbing the wool gently. Its fibers catch the dim firelight, reflecting a soft glow. You inhale and notice that the scent of wool feels grounding, almost as comforting as the warmth itself. Someone on the other side of the sleeping bundle shivers, and you instinctively lift part of your blanket to share its edge with them. They murmur a quiet thanks in their sleep, settling into the new warmth. The blanket stretches across both of you, now a shared shelter woven from scraps and necessity. You feel the heat balance out as bodies settle, and the gesture makes your chest soften. The wind rises outside and brushes the door with a hollow sigh. You pull the blanket tighter, feeling it cling to your form like a gentle shield. The fabric blocks most of the draft, though a faint coolness still nibbles at your toes. You tuck your feet closer beneath the layers, letting the warmth regain control. The cottage creaks in response to the cold, shifting its old bones. Your blanket remains steady, loyal. Your fingertips drift along a particularly soft patch, likely salvage from a child's old tunic. The contrast between the gentle cloth and the rougher pieces around it feels strangely comforting. You imagine the blanket's past life, the garments it used to be, the hands that wore them, the places they travelled through the seasons. Now they lie here with you, giving warmth a second or third life. A faint rustle beside you suggests someone adjusting their own blanket. The sound blends with the dying ember's soft crackle. Another sleeper sighs their breath, warming the blanket where it rests near your cheek. These quiet exchanges remind you how blankets are not merely fabric. They are markers of closeness, of shared survival, of winter nights endured together. You let your mind drift deeper into the comfort of the patchwork warmth. The fire's glow softens, turning the cottage into a dim world of shadows and muted gold. The blanket becomes your anchor, holding heat against your chest, sealing out the night's sharp edges. You bury your chin a little deeper, feeling the wool cradle your jaw. The cold presses faintly at the windows, but your blanket holds its place. You relax your shoulders, your thoughts slow. The scents of smoke, wool and straw swirl gently around you. You listen to the breathing of the sleepers, the steady chorus of a winter night's fragile peace. You nestle into the folds, allowing the warmth to melt the last bits of tension in your muscles. The blanket feels like a long, quiet promise stitched together by generations who survived their nights in the same ways you do now. Your eyelids grow heavy. Your mind drifts into soft patterns. The patchwork warmth wraps you securely, and with a slow exhale, you slip once more towards sleep, cradled by the humble quilt that guards you through the cold. You lie beneath the patchwork warmth for a while longer, drifting in gentle half-sleep, when a thought nudges at the edge of your mind. You did not arrive at this warm bundle by magic. Before you curled beneath the blankets, before the layers wrapped around your shoulders, before the shared heat settled across the straw, there was work. Cold, heavy, unavoidable work that no winter evening could begin without. You stretch your fingers beneath the covers, feeling the faint ache from the day's final chores still lingering in your knuckles. Your mind drifts back to the moment earlier when you stepped outside the cottage, the cold grabbing your face like an impatient hand. You had to haul water from the frozen trough at the edge of the yard. Even now you remember how the wood of the bucket burned your palms with its icy bite. There is a simple record in several old manorial accounts that describes how evening tasks were often completed long after sunset during winter, with families working together to prepare their homes for the night. You feel the truth of that deep in your bones. You shift slightly under your blanket and inhale the smoky scent that clings to the air. Before sleep comes, the shutters must be closed. The animals fed the fireplace, cleared the tools, put away the water stored safely so it does not freeze. Your mind moves through the list again, step by step, remembering how your breath fogged in front of you as you hurried through the twilight. You picture the bucket of water sloshing heavily as you carried it across the yard. The ground beneath your boots was hard frozen into uneven ridges that made every step a small negotiation with balance. Your arms trembled by the time you reached the door. A narrow memory surfaces of something a field hand once said with a tired grin. He claimed that hauling water in winter made a person stronger than swinging an axe, because at least the axe stayed warm in your hands. You had laughed then, but you felt the truth of it tonight. You rub your thumb along the edge of your blanket as you remember sealing the shutters. The cold had crept through every tiny gap, sinking its teeth into your cheeks. You stuffed straw into the crack at the bottom of the door, then pressed the latch firmly, hoping it would hold through the night. The sound of wood fitting into wood had been satisfying, a soft clunk that promised a small measure of safety. While you worked, the animals shuffled restlessly in the byre. You fed them their nightly portion, spreading hay with numb fingers, listening to their breath puff warmly into the freezing air. The glow of the lantern had stretched across the stall floor, giving every movement a trembling shadow. You stroked the nearest cow's shoulder, feeling the thick hide beneath your palm, grateful for the warmth that radiated from it. These animals would help heat your cottage tonight without ever knowing their part in your comfort. A curious memory resurfaces from a conversation at the mill, where an older farmer described how some families whispered a short blessing over their animals during deep winter evenings, hoping to keep them healthy through the cold nights. Whether the ritual held any practical value is uncertain, but the intention behind it feels tender. You imagine yourself murmuring such words, voice rising as soft mist in the cold, sealing unspoken gratitude into the air. You shift your body slightly under the blanket, the straw rustling softly beneath you. Your thoughts move to the hearth, the center of all preparation. Earlier tonight you crouched before the fading embers, scraping out the ash with slow, careful strokes. The iron scoop felt heavy in your hands. Sparks danced briefly when you cleared a space for new kindling. You added dry twigs, coaxing the fire with gentle breaths, until it accepted your effort with a warming glow. A faint hint of debate drifts through your memory from something you overheard during the harvest fair. Several people had argued about whether families truly maintained a small flame all winter, or whether some allowed the fire to go out entirely, choosing instead to borrow hot coals from neighbours each morning. Surviving accounts contradict each other, and the truth seems impossible to settle with certainty. Yet here in your own cottage you know the fire was never left to die fully. The cold outside is too harsh. You tended it tonight as you always do, grateful for even the faintest ember. You press your cheek gently against the rough wool of your blanket, letting its warmth hold you. Your mind continues drifting through the tasks of the evening. Before lying down, you swept the floor clean of the loose straw, making sure none rested too near the fire. The broom had scratched across the packed earth with each stroke, leaving a faint circling pattern that the dim firelight had traced like lines in a winter map. You tidied the wooden bowls, checked the food pot, made sure no stray spark could cause harm in the night. Someone nearby shifts their weight, tugging a corner of the blanket and pulling you gently back into the comfort of the present. You share the blanket without opening your eyes, adjusting your shoulders so they can settle near you. The warmth expands again, restoring the comfort that cold draughts tried to steal. Your thoughts return to the moment you crawled into bed. Your hands were still slightly stiff. The nails of your fingers held traces of ash. Your boots had been caked with frost that melted near the hearth. The chores linger in the body long after you finish them. You stretch your toes now just to feel the relief of warmth returning to them. A memory floats softly back to you, something you once overheard from a man who lived near the edge of the village. He claimed that finishing chores slowly and quietly invited better dreams, while rushing brought restless sleep. Whether or not the belief had merit, you remember working calmly tonight, pacing your breath with each task. You often find that these small rituals of care ease your mind before lying down. You shift your head slightly on the straw-filled pillow, feeling its uneven shape support your neck. The cottage is quiet except for the faint breathing of the sleepers, the gentle rustle of the straw, and the soft groan of a timber adjusting to the cold outside. The warmth from the group and the animals blends together in a single soft wave that washes over you. The memory of tired arms and cold fingers fades, replaced by a sense of completion. The chores are done. The night is prepared. You worked through the freezing air so that now wrapped in this fragile cocoon of blankets and shared warmth you can rest. You close your eyes fully, the echo of your evening tasks slipping gently into the depths of your thoughts. With each breath, the heaviness in your limbs sinks further into the straw. You feel the quiet satisfaction of having earned your rest, of knowing that everything is ready for the long winter hours ahead. Your body softens, your breathing slows, the night folds itself around you, and in the soft glow of fading embers you drift once more into sleep held by the warmth you worked so hard to create. You rest quietly, letting the blanket cradle your ribs when the weight of the air in the cottage shifts, in a way your body understands without thought. The smoke, always the smoke. You inhale carefully, noticing the subtle sting that collects low in your throat. Even with the fire nearly asleep, a fine veil of fumes lingers in the room, moving slowly through the rafters, like a drowsy spirit that refuses to leave. You blink once, letting your eyes adjust to the haze drifting above your head. The smoke is neither thick nor threatening, but it is everywhere, woven into the very air you breathe. A detail often found in early building accounts describes how most cottages vented smoke through nothing more than a hole in the roof or a simple gap beneath the thatch. Tonight you feel the truth of that with each shallow breath. The fumes rise, gather, swirl, then settle again, trapped by low ceilings and winter-stiffened air. You shift gently beneath your blanket, careful not to disturb the bodies sleeping beside you. A small cough comes from somewhere near the hearth, thin and dry. You hear someone exhale sharply, adjusting their position to escape the thicker patch of smoke near the floor. You turn your head slightly and tuck your nose deeper under the wool, catching the faint scent of your own blankets, instead of the smoky heaviness around you. The embers glow, faintly small red eyes blinking in the hearth's stone cradle. With each blink, another thin ribbon of smoke drifts upward, climbing slowly toward the dark beams overhead. You trace its path with your gaze, following its slow dancing curve until it dissolves in the shadows. A faint creak comes from above as if one of the rafters is clearing its throat. You smile sleepily at the idea. Your breath deepens once more, though the air feels warmer and heavier than you expect. You're reminded of something a young ploughman told you once while sharing a jug of warm broth. He claimed that breathing smoky air every winter built a strange kind of toughness in villagers since their lungs grew used to working harder. Whether it was wisdom or bravado you cannot say, but the idea returns now with a gentle hum of memory. You shift to your side, letting your cheek press into the blanket. The straw beneath you rustles, adding its own dry scent to the room. For a moment, the combination of smells becomes almost comforting, a blend of earth wool and the faint sweetness of cooling embers. You inhale softly, letting the air warm your chest before releasing it in a slow, steady exhale. A new thread of sensation brushes your awareness. The smoke feels thicker near the floor tonight. Perhaps the wind changed direction. Perhaps the thatch is damp. Perhaps the fire has sunk into a stubborn patch of wood. You lift your head slightly and breathe through the side of your blanket, feeling the familiar weight of smoke settle against your skin. You glance at the window slit and see only darkness. The air outside must be completely still. Someone near the far wall coughs again, a deeper sound this time. Their cough is followed by a soft groan and a shift of blankets. You imagine the air stinging their throat the way it sometimes does yours. A faint line from a midwinter tale rises to memory. A travelling storyteller once said that homes in winter became half shelter, half smokehouse, with families learning to breathe the darkness as if it were an old companion. You had laughed then, but now the words feel strangely accurate. You push your fingers out from beneath the blanket and wave them gently in the air, stirring the layer of smoke. The movement brings a small drop of cool air into your space, just enough to help you breathe without irritation. You pull your fingers back under the blanket, letting them warm again. The faint sting in your throat fades. A thought enters your mind from a discussion you overheard at the midsummer fair. Several people pondered how often medieval families suffered from the long-term effects of smoke-filled homes. The written evidence is scattered and incomplete, leaving many questions unanswered. You imagine future researchers leaning over old manuscripts, trying to understand how you're breathing right now in this dim room, surrounded by quiet fumes. You feel a strange amusement at the idea of being studied through guesses and fragments. The fire shifts unexpectedly, letting out a soft hiss. A small puff of smoke rises quickly, making the air swirl in a brief dance. You blink, letting your eyes clear. The warmth from the embers is still faintly present enough to soften the chill near your feet. You tuck your toes under another fold of blanket, grateful for the small comfort. You listen more carefully now. The cottage is full of tiny breaths shifting blankets, and the quiet ways smoke shapes the night. The rafters seem to hold the fumes like a low cloud. The air wraps around the sleepers, heavy yet familiar, as much a part of winter as frost or darkness. You feel your chest rise and fall slowly, your breath shallower than usual, but still calm. A ripple of warmth spreads through your ribs as you settle deeper into your bedding. Even the smoke, for all its weight, becomes part of the rhythm of sleep. You learn to breathe around it, through it, beneath it. You find small pockets of clearer air, tiny shelters created by the rise of body heat and the shape of blankets. You adapt in silence, the way generations did before you. Your eyelids grow heavy again. The smoky air blurs into a soft haze that rests against your thoughts. You focus on the warmth at your side, the steady breathing of those beside you, and the low glow of the embers. You tuck your chin deeper into the blanket, letting the wool filter the air for you. Slowly, gently, your body accepts the smoky darkness as part of the night. The fire sighs, A faint spark blinks. The smoke curls upward, soft and lazy. Your breath slows to match the quiet rhythm of the room. Wrapped in warmth, surrounded by the gentle hum of sleepers, you feel your mind slip back toward rest, trusting that the night will carry you safely through its hazy hours. You ease your breathing beneath the wool, letting the smoky air drift past your nose in thin, quiet ribbons. The night has grown deeper, and the fire has nearly surrendered to sleep, yet someone in the cottage still stirs with purpose. A soft shuffle, a creak of the floor, the whisper of a cloak brushing straw. You open your eyes, halfway recognizing the familiar rhythm of the one who tends the hearth through the coldest hours. Every family has such a person on winter nights. Maybe it is an elder who wakes easily, or a parent who cannot rest until the fire feels safe, or a child who pretends bravery when the darkness grows heavy. You watch the dim form move toward the hearth, now slow and careful, trying not to disturb those curled in the shared warmth. A faint glimmer from the embers lights their silhouette, just enough for you to guess who it is. They crouch beside the hearth, leaning close to assess the coals. In village accounts recorded by wandering clerks, there is a recurring observation that homes often relied on one designated watcher to keep the fire alive through long winter nights, especially when the cold threatened to slip inside. Tonight you feel grateful for that quiet diligence. You sense the chill lingering at the edges of the room, waiting for its chance to creep toward you if the embers fade too far. You hear a gentle puff of breath as the guardian leans close. A small tendril of smoke rises. The faint glow brightens, revealing their careful hands, adding a sliver of dry wood to the coals. The wood catches slowly, reluctantly, as though deciding whether it wishes to burn. A few sparks leap upward, scattering tiny golden flecks across the dark. You shift slightly, just enough to ease the pressure on one hip. The straw rustles beneath you, but the movement goes unnoticed in the quiet. Your eyes remain half open, watching the gentle ritual unfold. The guardian uses a small stick to nudge the embers, coaxing the fire without rushing it. You sense patience in every motion. Winter requires patience. Fires demand it. A memory drifts to you from something you once overheard at a marketplace. A travelling potter joked that tending a winter hearth was like caring for a stubborn old friend, one who needed reassurance every few hours. You think of that now as you watch the flames test their strength, flickering uncertainly before settling into a faint but steady glow. The figure near the fire straightens slowly, stretching tired shoulders. They murmur something under their breath. A soft blessing, perhaps. A quiet wish for the night to remain peaceful. The words are too faint to understand, but their tone carries warmth. You imagine that long ago families may have whispered small charms or prayers over the hearth, trusting the fire to guard them while they slept. Whether those whispers held power, or simply comforted the speaker, is impossible to know now. Your eyes drift to the ceiling, where the smoke gathers in a faint shifting cloud. The flame is small, so the smoke rises lazily, moving like a slow tide that touches each beam before thinning into darkness. Someone beside you shifts in their sleep, their breath warming the blanket near your cheek. You feel the comfort of being surrounded, even as the night thickens outside. A thought surfaces from a conversation you once heard at the edge of the monastery orchard. Several scholars had been discussing whether rural families tended their fires out of fear of cold or fear of darkness. Each theory had its believers, and the discussion remained unresolved. You smile faintly at the memory of their raised voices, so animated over a question your family answers simply by continuing the nightly ritual. Warmth and safety are reason enough. The guardian moves again, gently stirring the wood to encourage a stronger glow. A faint spark lights the room for a moment, drifting upward before fading. The fire grows no larger, but its warmth spreads just enough to soften the air. You feel it reach your toes, gentle and reassuring. Your muscles loosen without you realizing it. The figure hesitates for a moment longer, watching the hearth with narrowed eyes. Satisfied at last, they stand and move back through the dim room. Their steps are soft, almost floating across the straw. They settle into their place among the sleeping bodies, pulling a blanket around their shoulders with a sigh that blends seamlessly into the quiet. You close your eyes again, listening to the faint hum of the revived embers. The fire is awake now, not fully, but enough to keep the cold at bay for another stretch of night. You breathe slowly, letting the warmth drift into your chest with each inhale. The room shifts back into stillness. No more movement. Just breathing blankets rustling, the faint settling of straw. The Guardian's work is done for now, and the fire's light casts a soft, flickering glow across your eyelids. You snuggle deeper into your bedding, grateful beyond words for the small flame that keeps the night from creeping too close. The steady presence of a watching soul, the gentle persistence of a revived ember, the warmth that spreads through the darkness, quiet and loyal. Your breath softens, your body relaxes fully. The cottage seems to sigh, settling into its own sleep. With the hearth watched over and the night guarded, you drift once more toward rest, carried by the quiet confidence that warmth will survive until dawn. You sink deeper into the warmth, grateful for the small flame revived by careful hands, when your mind wanders to something softer, something sweeter than smoke and chores and winter discomfort. Memories. Specifically memories of food. Not the daily bread or the thin porridge scraped from the pot, but the rare feasts that punctuate the harsh months. Midwinter celebrations that glow bright in the mind long after the taste has faded. As your eyes drift half closed, you feel the gentle pull of those recollections warming you from the inside in a way the hearth never fully can. Your breath slows, and for a moment the smoky air seems to carry a faint phantom scent. Roasted roots, warm ale, a hint of honey that once dripped down your fingers during the winter feast. You smile sleepily, knowing it is only memory. Still, the thought of those flavours lifts your spirits in the cold night. In simple harvest logs kept by village stewards, there are brief mentions of such celebrations, often marking the change of the season or the survival of a difficult frost. These feasts were rare, treasured, stitched with meaning. You feel that meaning now as you let the memory settle warmly in your chest. You shift slightly beneath your blanket, careful not to disturb the sleeping bundle around you. Someone murmurs softly, perhaps dreaming of their own feast. You let the thought drift through your mind, the long table crowded with neighbours, the smell of steaming stew rising into cold air the way laughter warmed the space more than the fire ever could. Nights like that seemed carved from gold. Even if the feast was small, even if food was scarce, the togetherness made it feel abundant. A faint rumble of laughter echoes in your memory from last year's celebration. You recall a baker insisting that the best way to survive winter was to taste something sweet at least once before the season deepened. To prove his point, he passed around tiny pieces of honey cake no larger than a thumb, each one disappearing instantly into grateful mouths. You can almost feel the crumble between your teeth now, though your stomach is empty except for a thin evening meal. The embers shift in the hearth, sending up a slow ribbon of smoke that twists through the air like a quiet reminder of reality. Yet the memory of warmth from the feast lingers, softening your breath. You imagine bowls of hot broth shared among neighbours' hands, cupped gratefully around each vessel. The warmth had seeped into your fingers that night, chasing away the cold for hours. Another memory rises, this one softer, tinged with the tenderness of family. You recall the sight of a grandmother handing a child a baked apple dusted with spices she had saved all year. The child's smile had lit the room more brightly than the hearth. That small act left an imprint deeper than any grand meal could. You feel a quiet ache of fondness as you think of it. You tuck the blanket tighter beneath your chin. The cottage is silent, but your mind continues to glow with images of warmth and celebration. It reminds you that winter is not only hardship. There were moments of light, moments that knit the village together. A spice shared, a candle lit, a pot of stew carried across a yard to someone who needed it more. These gestures were tiny, but they lasted in the heart. You hear a faint grunt from someone beside you as they shift, perhaps chasing their own memories through dreams. The closeness of your sleeping family echoes the closeness of those feasts. Bodies pressed near voices blending together, heat pooling in the room. You stretch your toes beneath the blanket, letting the warmth from your memories flow downward like a second fire. A thought drifts into your mind, carried from a conversation you overheard near the mill. Several people spoke of how peasants used stories of past feasts to comfort themselves during particularly harsh nights. The recollections acted like small lanterns inside the mind, glowing quietly in the darkness. You realize you are doing the same now, holding on to the warmth of sweet food and happier hours. You let your mind wander to a curious tidbit someone shared at the midsummer fair. An elderly man swore that a sliver of cheese from the winter feast kept under one's pillow brought good dreams. Most laughed, but a few secretly tried it. You imagine the scent becoming stronger with each night, and you smile quietly at the thought. The cottage creaks again as the cold presses against its walls. You listen to the sound without worry. The warmth of your shared memories shields you from the darkness. You shift your weight and lay your cheek fully against the blanket, letting the wool cradle your skin. Your mind drifts to the flicker of lanterns at the feast, the way their light reflected in cups of warm drink, the faint glow on smiling faces. Another soft whisper of debate surfaces from something you once heard at the monastery. A few researchers wondered whether winter feasts were born primarily from religious traditions, or from the desperate human need to pause suffering with shared joy. No one can agree entirely. You suspect the truth is woven from both. Celebration becomes a kind of survival in winter, a reminder that warmth exists even briefly. Your breath deepens. The memory of sweet spices lingers on your tongue, imaginary yet soothing. The warmth from your family settles more firmly across your ribs. You feel the collective heat embracing you, shaped by both present reality and remembered comfort. Slowly, gently, the feast memories begin to fade, dissolving into soft impressions of colour and taste. You let them go with a quiet exhale, trusting that they have warmed you enough for the moment. The night folds itself around you again, softer now, shaped by both the faint glow of the embers and the glow you carry inside. Your eyelids grow heavy. Your body softens. Wrapped in patchwork warmth and the remnants of comforting memories, you drift once more toward the quiet, welcoming darkness of sleep. You lie still beneath the blanket, letting the warm echo of feast memories fade when a soft rasp rises from somewhere in the room. A cough, then another deeper one. The sound cuts through the quiet like a reminder you cannot ignore. Winter nights are not only cold or smoky or filled with small rituals of comfort. They are also nights when illness drifts easily through crowded homes. You swallow gently, feeling the dry air scratch the back of your throat. The room holds warmth, but it also holds every breath shared within its walls. You shift slightly, making room for the sleeper beside you, who curls closer, their breath warm on your shoulder. The air around you feels heavy again, not just from smoke, but from the simple fact of so many bodies crowded together. Old village notes describe how winter sickness was common in small cottages, where people slept in close clusters, breathing the same stale air for long hours. You feel that truth in the faint wheeze coming from the corner near the door, where an elder lies wrapped tightly in wool. You listen quietly, measuring each sound. Another cough surfaces, wet and tired. Then a child sniffles softly in their sleep. You sigh gently, your breath warming the inside of the blanket. Illness moves quickly in winter, a quiet visitor that slips in without knocking. Some nights it sits lightly, no more than a sore throat or a headache. Other nights it settles deeper and the household feels its weight. You rub your arm through the blanket, trying to ease a small stiffness in your chest. Your skin is warm, but the air feels thin. The smoke never helps. Someone shifts across the room, perhaps trying to find fresher air near the edge of the group. You understand the feeling. You lift the blanket slightly and let a small breath of cold air slip in before tucking yourself in again. Your thoughts drift to something a midwife once said as she warmed her hands by the fire. She explained that winter sickness often came from drafts, damp straw, or smoke clogging the lungs. She warned families to dry their bedding often and keep herbs ready. You think of her now, of her steady gaze and worn hands. You remember the smell of herbs she always carried, calming and sharp. You glance toward your small herb pouch tucked near your bedding. You wish the dried leaves could ward off every ailment, but you know they cannot. The cold outside presses so deeply into the village that even the strongest lungs sometimes falter. Yet these small bundles of dried plants offer comfort, if not cure. You breathe gently, trying to convince yourself the soreness in your throat is only a mild irritation. The embers glow faintly, casting a dim warmth across the faces sleeping near you. One sleeper shifts and lets out a soft groan, perhaps from fever, or from a sore muscle strained by the cold. You nudge your blanket toward them, sharing what warmth you can. They settle almost instantly, curling into the offered heat. You feel their breath deepen. You think of something you heard near the communal well during early winter. A man spoke quietly about a family that boiled pine needles to create a steam they inhaled to ease tight lungs. You had never tried it, but the idea returns now, gentle and hopeful. Perhaps tomorrow, if the coughs do not ease, you will gather what little greenery you can find. Your breathing becomes level again, but your mind remains alert. You listen closely to the room. The hum of sleeping breath continues with the occasional cough, woven into the rhythm. The sound is unmistakable. It transforms the softness of the night into something more fragile. Winter illnesses take their time, they linger, they come in waves. A soft debate you once overheard in a monastery resurfaces. Several scholars questioned whether peasants believed sickness came from cold air itself or from unseen spirits in the rafters. They pored over fragments of old notes, uncertain of the truth. You smile faintly at the memory. Tonight neither theory matters. What matters is the warmth you can offer, the closeness that steadies you, the shared breath that keeps fear from taking root. You adjust your position again, easing a small ache in your side. The straw beneath you rustles, offering its dry scent. Your blanket warms your chin as you pull it higher. Someone's hand brushes your arm in sleep, seeking comfort. You let them rest there. The warmth helps both of you. The fire shifts, releasing a small thread of smoke that drifts across the room. You inhale carefully, feeling your chest tighten just a little before it relaxes. You close your eyes, trying not to think too much about every cough you hear. Winter demands a balance of caution and acceptance. You cannot chase sickness away, but you can endure it with quiet patience. Your body softens again as the warmth from the sleepers settles over you. The coughs grow less frequent as exhaustion pulls even the unwell deeper into rest. The cottage creaks softly, the wind outside calming. You breathe in slowly, letting your breath warm your ribs. You listen to the night settle into a gentler rhythm. Your eyelids grow heavy. The faint soreness in your throat reminds you of the world outside, but the warmth around you steadies your thoughts. You tuck your chin beneath the blanket and allow your breath to deepen. Slowly, gently, your body releases tension. You exhale with a soft, weary sigh, letting the last of your wakefulness drift away. Wrapped in shared heat, listening to the fragile quiet of a winter night, you slip back towards sleep, trusting that morning will bring its own kind of healing light. You settle more fully into the blankets, letting the last echo of coughing fade into the background when a deeper quiet rises inside you. A stillness not shaped by the room, but by your own body. It comes from your stomach, from the long, slow ache that winter never seems to forget. Hunger, not sharp enough to keep you awake, not strong enough to alarm you, but present. Familiar. A patient companion in the cold months. You rest your hand against your belly beneath the blanket, feeling the dull emptiness there, and you breathe slowly through it. You adjust your weight in the straw, trying to ease the hollow feeling. The cottage is warm enough for sleep, yet hunger slips through warmth like a thin thread. In simple records kept by rural overseers, there are brief remarks that winter hunger shaped not only the body but also the dreams of villagers, leading to vivid images of food or fields or vanished feasts. You feel the truth of that as your mind drifts toward memories of meals long gone. Your eyelids flicker with the first traces of drowsy visions. You picture a loaf of coarse bread cooling on a wooden board. You imagine the smell rising warm and earthy. Then you imagine reaching for it, only for the image to blur like smoke. Hunger plays tricks in winter. It weaves hope and longing together until they become soft illusions behind your eyes. You shift again, feeling the straw shift beneath your hip. Someone next to you curls closer, their breath warming your shoulder. The closeness helps. Shared warmth almost distracts from the simmering emptiness inside. You nestle deeper, listening to the quiet breathing around you. In the hush, your body begins to release tension, even as your stomach grumbles faintly. A memory rises from earlier in the evening when you finished your modest supper. A thin stew with root vegetables, a few scraps of leftover grain, and a small piece of bread shared among the family. Not enough to fill you, but enough to keep you steady. A travelling baker once claimed that hunger sharpened dreams, giving them brighter colours and deeper sensations. You did not believe him then, but now with your stomach gently aching, you wonder if he was right. You lift a hand slightly and place it on your ribs, feeling their slow rise and fall. The sensation of hunger makes each breath more noticeable. A faint flutter of air brushes across your face as someone shifts nearby. You listen to the sound, letting it steady your heartbeat. Your thoughts drift again, this time towards something you heard from a group of elders sitting near the communal oven last winter. They spoke of the strange dreams that visited them during the leanest months. Dreams of overflowing granaries, warm milk, and sweet fruit they had not tasted in years. Some believed these dreams were gifts from unseen protectors meant to comfort tired minds. Others thought they were nothing more than the body pleading for nourishment. The elders themselves never reached agreement. You rub your arm beneath the blanket, trying to chase away the faint chill that hunger sometimes invites. Your stomach murmurs again, softer this time, as if whispering a question only sleep can answer. You take a long breath, letting it fill your lungs slowly before releasing it in a thin sigh. The fire in the hearth gives one last twitch of red, then settles into a deeper quiet. The darkness thickens, but it does not frighten you. Your mind begins weaving its own warmth, gathering fragments of comfort to soften the hollow inside. You picture fields ripening under summer sunlight, sheaves of golden grain stacked higher than your head. You imagine the smell of warm bread again, thicker this time, as if your mind refuses to let go of the memory. You shift your legs under the blanket, nestling your knees closer to your chest. The posture helps dampen the emptiness in your belly. Someone beside you breathes out a warm sigh, and you feel the blanket tighten around both of you as the sleeper shifts closer. Their warmth spreads across your side, steady and grounding. You think back to a story told by a shepherd who claimed that hunger sharpened intuition. He said that on the hungriest nights he often dreamed of the exact places where he would find lost sheep the next day. You had laughed, but he spoke with such calm certainty that the idea stayed with you. You wonder now, as your thoughts drift in strange shapes, if hunger truly changes the path of dreaming. Another faint notion rises from a discussion you once overheard at a village gathering. Some people believed that dreams influenced by hunger carried hints of the coming season, guiding families in subtle ways. The idea has no firm foundation, and the few remaining notes on the subject conflict with each other. Yet the thought lingers now, gentle and curious. Your breathing deepens. The ache in your stomach shifts from sharp to soft. In its place grows a kind of dreamy heaviness that eases your mind into a quieter space. You feel yourself floating slightly, as though the straw beneath you has softened into clouds. The warmth from surrounding bodies wraps your ribs. The smell of wool fills your nose. The darkness settles over you like a soft cloth. Somewhere in the room, a sleeper mutters something unintelligible before falling still again. Their voice, though faint, feels like an anchor keeping you grounded. Your thoughts loosen further. Images drift through your mind, slow and luminous. A loaf of bread glowing like a lantern. A bowl of hot broth you can almost taste. Ripe apples hanging heavy from a summer branch. These visions carry no urgency, only a gentle pull toward deeper rest. You close your eyes fully now, letting the images blend into the soft dark. The hunger remains, but it becomes part of the rhythm of the night, a familiar companion. You accept it, breathe through it, and let your mind drift. Little by little, you slip toward dreams shaped by warmth, memory, longing, and the quiet emptiness inside you. You curl tighter beneath the blanket, letting the haze of half-sleep settle over your thoughts, when a faint sound reaches you from outside the warmth of your little bundle. A muffled voice, then another. Not in the room, but drifting faintly through the thin cottage wall. You freeze for a moment, listening closely. It is not alarming. It is simply life moving quietly in the neighbouring homes. Winter nights carry sound in unexpected ways. You shift your head against the straw, letting one ear free beneath the blanket. The cold air nips your skin, but you hold still, waiting. Another murmur drifts across the yard, a soft exchange between neighbours finishing a late task, or perhaps settling their own fire before sleep. The closeness of the village becomes more apparent in winter when thin walls and frozen air turn private moments into shared echoes. You exhale softly, remembering something preserved in a few surviving court notes from rural communities. These documents describe how tightly packed cottages often allowed villagers to hear one another clearly through the walls during quiet hours, especially on cold nights when sound travelled farther. You feel the truth now in each faint voice brushing your ears like the lightest tap on wood. Someone in the cottage beside yours closes their door. The latch clicks gently, followed by a stretch of silence. You can almost picture them in their own dark room adjusting their blankets, whispering a final word to a loved one before sleep. You imagine the warmth of their breath fogging the air the same way yours does. The thought feels comforting, like the village is settling into one long shared breath. Another sound rises from outside. A dog gives a short questioning bark, then falls quiet. Perhaps it sensed movement. Perhaps it dreamed. Dogs and humans share the night in equal parts here. Their voices become part of the winter song. You tuck your ear back beneath the blanket, seeking warmth again. The cold had crept in quickly. Someone beside you shifts, bringing their arm against yours. The shared heat steadies your breathing. Through the blanket, the outside voices become muffled once more, fading into soft tremors rather than distinct words. Your mind drifts to a curious detail told by an elderly shepherd last summer. He claimed that during long winter nights, villagers sometimes rested easier, knowing they were not alone in the silence. Hearing neighbours whispering, arguing quietly, or even laughing faintly reminded them that others were awake working through the same cold. You think of that now, feeling a small sense of companionship in the distant murmurs. The cottage walls creak lightly, warmed by the bodies pressed against them on both sides. The faint cold tries to slip through cracks, but the thick patchwork of moss cloth and bundled straw stuffed into every seam makes the house feel like a living creature, adjusting itself to the weight of winter. Then a new sound surfaces, a faint scraping, slow and steady. Someone in the next cottage is moving a stool or sweeping a patch of floor before bed. You imagine them brushing away stray husks or clearing a spot near the fire. These little routines echo through the walls with gentle persistence, becoming a backdrop for your own sleep. You shift slightly, creating a softer nest in the straw. The rustling beneath your body blends with the external noises, forming a quiet chorus of human life. A baby whimpers somewhere nearby, followed by the hushed comfort of a parent. You feel a twinge of tenderness at the sound. Your mind drifts toward a question you once heard debated in the churchyard. Several villagers wondered if winter brought families closer because of the shared hardships, or because the long nights forced them into tight quarters. Some said closeness bred conflict, others insisted it strengthened bonds. The discussion had ended without resolution. As you listen to the soft village sounds surrounding you now, you sense that both might be true. Winter reveals both tenderness and tension. You shift your blanket slightly so it covers your ear once more, muffling the outside world. The voices fade, replaced by the steady breathing of those beside you. Yet even through the wool, you sense the presence of others settling into sleep across the village. The thin walls feel more like a web, quietly connecting you all through shared cold and shared resilience. Your own breathing slows again. The faint ache of hunger softens. The smoky air feels warmer, gentler. You let your eyes close, fully letting the muted world beyond your cottage become a soft hum. The warmth of those sleeping beside you draws you inward, back toward rest. As you drift, the last sound you hear from outside is a quiet laugh, barely audible, quickly swallowed by the night. A simple reminder that life persists even in the deepest cold. You let that small warmth settle in your thoughts as you glide once more towards sleep, sheltered by your family and surrounded by the subtle heartbeat of the village. You lie very still beneath the blanket, the faint echo of distant voices fading into sleep-dusted quiet when a low groan rolls across the cottage roof. The sound is long and heavy, like old wood bracing itself for something far greater than the cold you feel now. You open your eyes slightly, sensing a shift in the air. The night outside deepens, thickens, tightens. A storm is coming. You breathe in through your nose, catching the scent of smoke mingled with the sharp hint of icy air squeezing through the tiniest cracks. The wind presses harder against the shutters, testing them, pushing at the fragile edges of the cottage. In simple weather notes kept by watchful monks, there are descriptions of a nights just like this when winter storms sweep through villages, with the force of a living creature rattling doors like hungry hands. You feel that truth now in every tremor of the wood around you. A sudden gust slams against the far wall. The sound thunders through the small room, startling a couple of sleepers who shift and mumble beneath their blankets. You instinctively curl tighter, pulling the wool up to your chin. The storm's howl outside grows sharper, a long rising wail that spirals around the cottage like a restless spirit circling for warmth. The noise presses into your ears, making the room seem smaller, the night deeper. You shut your eyes again, letting the darkness inside your blanket soften the sounds. But the storm refuses to be ignored. The wind claws at the thatch, ripping loose a few dry reeds that scatter down the roof. You hear them hopping and clicking across the beams above your head. The cottage creaks hard, as if pushing back with all its strength. You inhale, slowly steadying yourself. Someone beside you pulls the blanket closer in their sleep, burying their face against your shoulder. Their breath is warm, a comforting contrast to the storm's cold fury. Another sleeper mutters something faint and incoherent, perhaps reacting to the sudden roar outside. You feel the tension ripple through the group, then settle again as warmth wins out for now. Your thoughts drift reluctantly to the door. It feels impossibly thin in this moment, like a flimsy barrier against something immense. You picture the latch holding tight, the straw stuffed under the frame, trembling with each gust. Earlier in the evening you had pressed it firmly into place, but storms like this often make even strong doors feel fragile. The memory of sealing it gives you a small anchor now. The wind gathers again, building into a sound so deep it almost vibrates through the straw beneath you. You open your eyes, watching the dim shape of the shutter lift slightly before settling again. The crack of icy air that slips through chills your toes instantly. You tuck them under someone's legs to steal warmth, earning a sleepy grunt of surprise before they drift back into dreams. Your mind wanders to something a travelling shepherd once told you. He claimed that winter storms carried voices of the mountains booming loudly to remind villages of their smallness. Others believed the storms were messages from wandering spirits urging people to stay indoors and close to their loved ones. Neither tale is proven, and the notes left behind by early chroniclers do not settle the question. Yet tonight, as the storm roars, the idea feels strangely fitting. You shift your weight in the bedding, feeling the straw cradle your back, even as the wind shakes the walls. The roar becomes a kind of rhythm rising and falling in long, uneven waves. At times it sounds like a distant ocean, at other times like an animal breathing heavily just outside your door. Your skin prickles at each sudden burst, but the warmth of the sleeping bodies around you steadies your heartbeat. A particularly fierce gust rattles the shutters so hard that the whole cottage seems to flinch. You hold your breath, listening for any sign of damage. The wood groans, but nothing breaks. You release the breath slowly, letting relief melt into your chest. The fire, faint as it is, offers a tiny crackle of reassurance, as if reminding you it still stands guard. You pull the blanket tighter around your shoulders, adjusting so the cold air cannot find its way inside. The storm continues, its wild song rushing along the frozen ground, ricocheting off cottages, rolling through the village like a living force. You imagine the snow outside swirling in dense clouds, sweeping across roofs and yards, turning everything into a blur of white and shadow. Someone near the hearth whimpers softly in their sleep, perhaps dreaming of being out in the storm. You place your hand gently against their blanket, offering silent comfort. They settle quickly, their breathing deepening as the warmth around them soothes whatever fear surfaced. Another heavy gust hits, but this time you feel less afraid. The cottage may tremble, the shutters may rattle, but the warmth inside holds firm. You rest your cheek against the wool and listen more carefully. Beneath the roar you hear the steady breathing of your family, the faint shifting of straw, the tiny crackle of the last embers. These sounds form a quiet shield against the storm's chaos. You let your eyelids drop. The noise outside becomes a distant rush, softened by the cocoon of blankets and bodies. The storm still rages, but your mind grows heavy, drifting toward the edge of sleep once more. Each breath you take warms the small space beneath your blanket. The cold stays outside where it belongs. Your body relaxes inch by inch. The wind howls again, but you're no longer listening closely. Warmth wraps your ribs. The straw settles. A steady heartbeat of sleep rises inside you. You breathe a final slow inhale, letting it anchor you. And even as the storm thrashes against the night, you slip gently into sleep, held close by the warmth within the fragile but faithful walls. You sleep a little, or perhaps you only drift rocked by the uneasy rhythm of the storm. At some point, the wind changes its voice, softening into a long, low moan that feels less like a threat and more like a tired creature settling down after hours of pacing. You stir beneath the blanket eyes, half opening to a dimness that feels different. The air is quieter now, heavier too. You sense before you fully wake that the worst of the storm has passed. You breathe slowly, letting the wool warm your nose before you draw the air deeper. A faint glow flickers from the hearth, so small and thin it looks like a memory rather than a flame. Yet that little ember is enough to tell your sleepy eyes something new. The darkness is changing. It no longer presses against the cottage the way it did during the storm. Instead, it feels like it is thinning at the edges, loosening its grip on the night. You shift slightly the straw beneath you, whispering gently. Someone beside you murmurs, stretching stiffly. Another sleeper lets out a soft snort before settling again. Their breaths blend into the quiet, and for a moment you listen to that human warmth, like it's the only sound in the world. Then faintly you hear something else, a soft brightening in the air beyond the shutter. Not a sound exactly, more like a feeling, a hint of dawn. It comes slowly, always slowly in winter. Dawn does not rush into a medieval cottage the way it does in summer. It creeps careful and pale, as if testing whether the world is ready for it. But you can sense the shift. The darkness no longer feels endless. It feels like it is preparing to lift. You pull your blanket up to your chin and let the thoughts settle in your chest. A note preserved in an old weather-watching journal once described winter dawns as the hour when even the frost seems to hesitate. You feel that hesitation now. The cold outside remains fierce, but the sky beyond the walls must be changing. You slide your hand out from beneath the blanket for a moment. The air bites your fingers instantly. You retreat them quickly, burrowing back into the warmth. Yet in that brief moment you sense that the cold has a different quality than before. Less wild, less sharp. As though it has spent its fury during the storm and now rests in a quieter, exhausted form. Someone on the far side of the room coughs softly, then falls still again. A child shifts against a parent's arm, seeking warmth. A faint scent of smoke lingers from the hearth, mingling with the soft smell of wool and straw. These familiar fragrances form a cocoon around you, pulling you back toward drowsiness. But something inside you remains aware. You sense the world lightening. Your mind drifts to something an elderly farmer once told you near the communal oven. He said that dawn in deep winter always feels like a promise, even when the day itself brings nothing but more cold and hungry work. The promise is not of warmth, but of survival, of another day wrestled from the hands of the season. You think of his wrinkled smile as he said that, and the memory warms you more than the thin fire ever could. The wind taps weakly at the wall, no longer strong enough to rattle it. You hear a soft slide of frost crystals falling from the thatch landing, with tiny ticks that barely touch your ears. The storm's anger has passed, leaving behind a whirl that is slowly, cautiously quieting. Your stomach growls faintly, reminding you that dawn brings hunger long before it brings food. You press your hand against your belly, soothing the ache with small circles. You know there is little to eat in the morning, but dawn has its own kind of nourishment. Light is a meal of its own when you have lived through a long storm-tossed night. You tuck your face into the blanket again, breathing the familiar scent. Sleep nudges your mind gently, but something in you stays half awake, listening for the faintest sign of the world outside brightening. A distant bird might stir soon, or maybe the first hint of pale grey will find its way through the shutter crack. You slowly turn onto your back, staring at the ceiling beams, where a thin line of lighter darkness seems to gather. Is it real, or just your eyes adjusting? You blink, then blink again. There it is. The barest suggestion of morning brushing the edges of shadow. A quiet debate you once overheard at the mill drifts back to you now. Several villagers argued over whether animals sensed dawn before humans, no matter how tightly the shutters were closed. One insisted cows began shifting at the first hint of light. Another claimed chickens felt the change through their feathers. No agreement was ever reached. But tonight you find yourself listening to the cattle through the wall, waiting to see if they stir. For a moment everything is perfectly still, then faintly you hear it. A soft grunt, a shift of weight, a dull thud of hooves rearranging themselves in the straw, a slow, sleepy movement that feels unmistakably tied to the approaching morning. You smile to yourself, feeling the animals confirm what your senses already suspected. Dawn is near. The realization eases something deep in your ribs, not joy exactly, not relief. Something gentler, a loosening, a reminder that the night, no matter how fierce, never holds the world forever. You exhale slowly, letting the warm air fill the small space beneath your blanket. Your eyelids flutter heavy with the long night. Part of you wants to stay awake to greet the light. Another part wants to sink into one last stretch of rest before the day's chores begin. Both instincts meet in the middle, leaving you in a drifting dream, salted stillness. You snuggle deeper into the straw, letting the faint brightness seep into your thoughts. The worst of the cold remains outside, defeated for now. Inside, warmth gathers around your body like a soft shield. Your breath slows, matching the gentle rhythm of the sleepers around you. And in that peaceful hush, with the world just beginning to lighten at the edges, you drift softly back into sleep, warmed by the quiet promise of dawn. You hover in that soft drifting space between sleep and waking, aware of the faint brightening outside, yet unwilling to surrender the warmth wrapped around you. The night has loosened its grip, but morning has not fully claimed the world. This in-between hour feels gentle, almost suspended. You breathe slowly, letting the wool warm your face as your thoughts lean quietly toward the day ahead. Not the chores themselves, just the simple rhythm of waking, of readying the cottage for another cycle of cold and endurance. You shift slightly, and the straw beneath you shifts with a dry whisper. Someone beside you exhales their breath, brushing your shoulder. Another sleeper stretches their legs, the blanket pulling tight for a moment before settling again. These small movements signal the beginning of morning in a medieval home long before sunlight reaches the cottage floor. Your eyes open just a sliver. The room is still dim, though a faint grey tone outlines the beams overhead. You lift your head slightly, feeling the weight of the blanket slide along your cheek. The fire has nearly given up, leaving only 2 pale embers glowing like tired eyes in a cool hearth. Yet this is enough to give the room shape, enough to ease you toward wakefulness without urgency. You inhale, slow and deep. The smoke smell is softer now, gentler than in the night. The air feels thinner. Still cold, but no longer biting. You shift your hand out from the layers, and while the air stings your skin, it no longer feels hostile. This is the first gift of morning in winter, a slight easing of the cold's sharpest edge. A small thought rises, sparked by something you once heard in a seasonal gathering. A caretaker of livestock mentioned that mornings after storms felt calmer, not only to people, but also to animals, as though the world itself paused to recover. You hear that truth now in the stillness through the wall. The animals move, but slowly. No restless pacing, no uneasy breaths, just quiet morning shuffles. You stretch your arms carefully beneath the blanket, feeling your joints wake one by one. A hint of stiffness clings to your shoulders from sleeping curled tightly through the cold. You massage the tension, gently warming your hands against your skin. The straw conforms again to your motions, forming new hollows beneath your shifting weight. Your thoughts drift toward the rituals that follow waking, tending the fire, shaking the bedding, checking the straw for dampness, relighting the room with motion and breath. These routines have shaped winter mornings for countless households. An old villager once claimed that how a person tended their hearth at dawn determined the tone of the entire day. You think of that now, imagining the first spark catching the kindling, the slow rise of heat spreading from the hearth to the body still bundled in wool. You push your blanket a little lower, enough for your face to fully greet the cool morning air. A shiver runs through you, but it feels cleansing rather than punishing. The air smells clearer now, less dense with smoke, more touched by frost. You inhale again, letting the sensation ground you. Someone farther across the room yawns with a long, sleepy sound. Their breath fogs faintly in the cold air, and you watch the small cloud drift upward before dissolving. Another sleeper rubs their eyes, muttering softly. These morning murmurs form a familiar chorus, rising gently through the cottage like birdsong made of breath and wool. A half-forgotten detail from an old parish manuscript slips quietly into your thoughts. It described how rural families viewed the act of shaking out their bedding each morning as necessary, not only for cleanliness, but also for shooing away any lingering spirits of the night. Whether meant literally or as a symbol of renewal, the idea feels fitting. As you imagine the blankets lifted, the straw fluffed, the cold chased away with movement. You slowly shift your legs, preparing to sit up. But the warmth at your side pulls you back for a moment. A child leans against your hip, their sleepy weight soft and trusting. You place a gentle hand on their shoulder, letting them rest a little longer in the warmth before the cold floor wakes them fully. Their hair smells faintly of smoke and straw, a scent that somehow feels comforting in its simplicity. Your stomach murmurs again, reminding you that the day will begin with hunger sharpened by the long night. You rub your belly once accepting the feeling. Breakfast will be sparse as always in winter, but at least morning brings the chance to warm your body with movement and chores. The faint grey light through the shutter grows a little brighter. Just barely. Enough to soften the shadows. Enough to outline the tools by the wall and the curve of the low wooden bench. Dawn is claiming the room now, not in a rush, but in a slow gathering of pale colour. You lift your head again and breathe the cold air with steadier lungs. Someone begins to stir near the hearth, shifting their weight, as if sensing it is nearly time to tend the fire. The embers glow faintly, waiting for careful hands to coax them back to life. You picture the first small flame rising, then the warmth spreading through the room like a slow sunrise. A conversation you once heard near the village mill drifts into your mind, where several people wondered if mornings brought relief, mostly because the darkness lifted, or because communities felt safer once the light returned. No agreement had been reached, but you sense both ideas hold truth. Dawn brings clarity. Dawn brings action. Dawn brings the quiet reassurance that the worst cold has passed for now. You nestle deeper one last time, savouring the warmth that lingers before you must rise. The straw cushions your back. The wool wraps your ribs. The breath of your family forms a soft blanket of its own. You stay in that stillness, letting the morning seep gently into your thoughts. Soon you will rise. Soon you will shake out the bedding, stir the fire, fill the water bucket, mend whatever the storm loosened. But not yet. For now you remain tucked in the fragile warmth of transition, balanced between the long night behind you and the day waiting ahead. With a slow inhale, you let the first hint of dawn settle in your chest, soothing and light. Your eyes close, briefly savouring the calm, and then drifting in the glowing quiet, you soften once more towards sleep, letting morning take its time before calling you fully awake. You rest in that fragile in-between state for another quiet moment, balanced on the edge of waking, when the faintest shift in the room reminds you that the day is no longer waiting outside. It is slipping in through every crack and seam, subtle but steady. You breathe in the cold morning air and feel it tighten your chest before loosening again as the warmth from nearby bodies cushions the impact. The night has ended, though the cold has not. You open your eyes a little more. Pale grey light creeps through the shutter crack, outlining the room in soft shapes. The tools against the wall emerge first, then the cluster of blankets, then the faint gleam of frost clinging to the inside edge of the doorframe. Winter leaves its mark everywhere, even indoors. You shift slowly, feeling the straw beneath you groan in its familiar way. Someone near the hearth begins to stir in earnest. A slow inhale, a stretch, a quiet grunt. Their movements send a ripple through the shared bedding, as others shift, automatically drawn toward wakefulness by subtle changes in the air. You lift your head slightly and watch as the faintest breath of morning illuminates the weary glow of the last ember in the hearth. The ember pulses faintly like a tired heart. You know it will need tending soon. You picture adding kindling, leaning close to coax a flame, feeding it until it spreads warmth beyond its small red glow. A detail noted in a faded household ledger mentions that tending the morning fire was considered the first true task of the day, a symbolic gesture of pushing back the cold. Even now, half buried in blankets, you feel that responsibility waiting. You stretch one arm cautiously beyond the warmth of your bedding. The cold bites instantly, but not with last night's sharpness. You curl the blanket back around your ribs, warming your arm again before trying a second time. This is the true rhythm of surviving winter. One breath of cold, one pull back to warmth, one more breath of cold. Slowly you negotiate with the morning. The cottage fills with small sounds, a soft sniffle, a sigh of breath. A child shifting closer to a parent, a bit of straw crackling beneath the knee. These tiny notes gather into the first delicate music of the day. You watch as eyelids flutter open across the room, some reluctantly, some with quiet resignation. Someone coughs a thin sound. Another sinks deeper into their blanket, resisting the inevitable. You almost laugh at the familiarity of it. Winter mornings invite resistance. They beckon you to stay in the warmth, just a little longer, to postpone the confrontation with cold air and endless chores. But duty whispers louder than comfort in houses like this. You roll to your side, gathering the energy to rise. Before you do, your gaze wanders briefly across the faces around you. They look peaceful in the pale morning light. These are the same faces you huddled with through storms, through smoke, through restless dreams. You feel the weight of shared survival in every breath they take. Families in winter are not simply households. They are clusters of warmth and determination bound together by necessity and tenderness in equal measure. Your thoughts drift to a conversation you once overheard near the hayfields during autumn. Several villagers spoke quietly about how winter tested the spirit, how each night felt like a small battle against cold and hunger, and how waking every morning felt like quietly winning that battle again. The idea resonates now as you slowly push the blanket aside. A rush of cold air kisses your skin, sending a quick tremor through your limbs. You grit your teeth, gently adjusting your posture. The cold always feels harsh in the first moment. Then the body remembers. You sit up, letting the blanket fall into your lap, the wool pooling like a heavy cloud around your hips. The fire's embers blink in your direction as if waiting. You shuffle closer, feeling the chill beneath your feet through the thin straw. When you reach the hearth, you crouch slowly, leaning near the stone cradle. Your breath touches the embers and they glow a little brighter. You add a few dry sticks, watching them settle into place. With a steady breath, you coax the first tiny flame of the morning to life. It catches slowly, hesitantly, before climbing into a thin ribbon of light. You watch it grow just enough to cast a faint warmth into the chilled air. Behind you, the sleepers stir again, reacting instinctively to the promise of heat. Someone sighs with relief. Another mumbles a faint thank you, though they may not remember saying it. You sit back on your heels, letting the fire warm your face. The world outside remains bitter and white, but here inside the day begins with a soft glow. Your breath rises in the cold, forming a small cloud that disappears into the dim air. You glance toward the shutter. Pale morning has grown brighter. Soon you will open it. Soon the day will fully enter the cottage, bringing with it chores and cold air, and the quiet resolve to endure another cycle of winter. You stand slowly testing your balance on the uneven floor. Your stomach murmurs with hunger. Your shoulders feel stiff from the tight curling of sleep. Yet you feel something stronger beneath the weary body. A steadiness. A quiet determination shaped by countless winter mornings just like this. You pull the blanket from the floor and shake it gently to remove the clinging bits of straw. Another sleeper rises and begins shaking theirs as well. The soft flutter of fabric becomes a small ritual of renewal through the room. Straw shifts. Beds reshape. Warmth circulates. The day has begun. You breathe slowly, letting the motions of morning continue around you, while your mind drifts into a softer rhythm. The pale light spreads gradually across the cottage, touching each beam, each mound of blankets, each bundle of straw that held you through the night. Your body feels the first hints of fatigue easing, replaced by a quiet readiness. Yet beneath that readiness is something gentler, a soft hum of calm that invites you not to rush. Allow yourself to linger in this moment. Let the warmth of the blanket still clinging to your skin stay with you for just a little longer. Imagine the faint glow of the fire spreading calmly through the room, not urging you forward, but wrapping you in a slow, steady comfort. With every breath you take, feel the cold air soften slightly before you draw it into your lungs. Let that slow inhale remind you that you have survived a long winter night, and that morning does not need to hurry. Picture the cottage settling into its morning rhythm. Soft footsteps across the straw. A gentle shake of bedding. The quiet flicker of new flames in the hearth. The world outside remains cold, but here inside you have a pocket of warmth, a small circle of safety shaped by your own steady perseverance. Let your thoughts drift like slow-moving smoke rising from the embers. Let them soften at the edges. Let them ease into a quiet glow. You rest in this simple warmth, the same warmth countless winter nights have offered to those who came before you. You breathe it in. You let it settle under your ribs, and you release the breath slowly without effort. As your thoughts continue to soften, allow yourself to drift gently toward rest. The morning waits patiently outside. For now, let your eyelids grow heavy, let the calm spread, and let the quiet hold you until sleep comes again.